we go. Better. Nope. Better. All right, let me just send out a Discord announcement, as is wont. As is wont to do. It's such a good phrase. Oh, nobody's here yet. Howdy, howdy. We are just starting. Testing 1, 2, 3. I think my audio should be all set. Hello, hello. I think we're good. Get that chat box out. I already did the regular focal cleansing. I actually did it like 2 minutes ago. Howdy, howdy. Hope everybody's having a day. All right, I think we got everything set up. Great, yep, we should be all good to go. Why is my audio so loud? Am I peaking? What? Why is my audio so loud? Oh, I know what's happening. Testing. Testing, testing. 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 Oh, sorry, one sec. That's why. That would explain that. That should be better. Hopefully that's better. I think so. Yeah. How's that? That better? And my audio. Yeah, okay. Great. I'm glad. For some reason my audio's being picked up super loud right now. Okay, good. Hopefully the peaking's gone on both YouTube and on TikTok. Should be good to go. Righto. All right, so you guys know what to do. Like the live, get this sent out to more people, and then we can get the party started, if you will. I think it's pronounced Beijing. I've been had. You're right. All right, let's just double check on things. Yeah, for some reason it's picking me up really, really clearly, even though it's kind of far from my mic, and my mic isn't very. It's not set to maximum volume. So that's kind of surprising. But look, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to complain if my audio is working better. I don't think I did anything to it. Yeah, who knows? What's the ology of the day? How about entropyology? Yes, we have done the regular focal cleansing today already. It already happened. It happened actually before I even started live. Do you have your plaid shirt? Look, it sits behind my chair. Oops. Like it's a shirt that I wear when I'm cold because it's like a pullover. Did I update to Windows 11? I've been on Windows 11 for a while. Yeah, quantology. There you go. There you go. Does the point of knowing something exists contradict the idea of faith? I don't think so. I would debate you, but I'd win again. I kind of doubt that, but I don't actually remember who you are, so I'm just a little bit skeptical of the claim that you've won in the past. Let's double check on the YouTube stream. Okay, we're good on the YouTube stream. Yeah, so remember to... Oh, I guess we're a bit early today. So, weak rage bait. Do you think that this is rage bait? I'm not even insulting anybody. I'm not saying that... I'm not saying that, like, your God isn't real. I'm not, like, I don't have, like, big horns up behind Jesus or anything. Like, what? How is this rage bait? You planning a video for the quantum navigation thing? I haven't heard about the quantum navigation thing, so Would you believe if a baby grew its limb back? I mean, if I watched that happen in front of me, maybe, yeah. Yeah, rageology, there you go. Oh, let's pay attention to YouTube chat too. I don't want to let you guys down on YouTube chat. Have I seen the comment? Which comment? Blitz, do you prefer we watch on YouTube over TikTok? Perhaps. Just because it gets sent out to more people on YouTube that way. Although TikTok always gets more views anyway. At least for now. TikTok chat, well, look, I mean, you guys can be wherever you want. It doesn't really matter to me. If you need someone to prove that God is real, then you don't have faith and probably won't convert. Why would someone believe something if they don't have evidence for it? Explain how inorganic chemical compounds can evolve into complex living things. Well, I mean, look, I'm not a biologist, but from what I've been told by biologists, this is like pretty well understood. At least the mechanisms are pretty well understood. The question is just, you know, how do we know how all of those mechanisms fit together to give us the whole process? Lockheed have demonstrated a replacement for GPS that measures on a quantum level. That's kind of neat. Maybe I'll make a video about it. Put it in the video suggestion box on the Discord. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube or on TikTok, you can join a Discord. What's your framework for debating against the fine-tuning argument? Question the first premise. How do you know everything's fine-tuned? That's the easiest way to dismantle it, right? Of course, there are other approaches, and we can talk about it in more depth. But what do you mean, your God? Is there more than one? Well, yeah, like a Muslim and a Christian will disagree on that. Will disagree if you say that their God is the same God, or a Hindu and a Jewish person will disagree on whether their gods are the same ones, right? So. Was math invented or discovered? I kind of lean towards, or pretty heavily lean towards, invented, actually. Have you considered the modal ontological argument? I have, yeah. What's the OPI chapter Ian suggested you yesterday? Chapter 10 in the book, what is it, Designing God or something like that? Sloppy Jones with the $1. Thanks. Oh, why isn't my stream updater updating? It should have picked that up. Is that a super chat, or is that... Or I guess that's not a super chat because it's not a super chat. It's just a different thing. What led you to be an atheist? I've been an atheist as long as I can remember. So, nothing. No one particular thing. What was your rebuttal to modal ontological argument? I mean, essentially... that like the modal scope seems confused, and it also falls to parity arguments, if I remember correctly. If everything is just random particles, why does consciousness exist? Who said anything about random? Y'all need to get better talking points. They're like 100 years out of date. Dude, you should watch the AI debate over God on YouTube. Why would I watch AI debate? That seems useless. It seems like a waste of time. A Muslim scholar has all the answers. If that's true, you should bring them up. What if dark matter is just baryonic detritus from quanta that never achieves spin momentum? It can't. Quanta have to have spin and momentum, right? What do you think is the hardest argument for God to rebuke? I don't think that there are a lot of hard ones. I mean, like, if you get into like the really heavy philosophy stuff, like they can get hard to refute just because they're so jargon laden. But that doesn't make them good arguments. So, why are you so negative? I'm like wildly positive, actually. Borg-Guth-Lincoln theorem is evidence of definitive creation. You want to come up and talk about it? Because it's not. This guy just deny everything. Do I? What evidence would you accept for the existence of a creator? I don't know. But surely God would know, right? Can cyclical models solve the problem of entropy for an infinite past? Yeah, like there are plenty of models that can solve that solve the entropy problem. Yeah. Christians should watch the Alex O'Connor Jubilee video. That was a good one. Alex O'Connor is quite clever. I don't know where all the guests are. It seems that we have nobody today. Y'all remember to like the live. We can get this sent out to more people, so then we can get some people in the guest box. Yeah, seems like we're, are you working on any projects? Obviously I'm working on projects. I've never talked to Alex O'Connor, but of course I would. He seems like a very genuine guy and quite clever. The Holy Spirit is indeed weak. Such is the way of things. Maybe shut up if you're going to be disrespectful. Who's... Oh, that wasn't for me, never mind. It might just be early. We have a guest, though. Nope, we had a guest and then they left. What do you think of the YouTube channel Spirit Science? I've never heard of it. Sounds kind of lame, though. What about Balmistra and Merkel? A good point. Those gods are real. I wonder why extreme intelligence is the superior form of evolution, yet only developed in monkey. It's not the supreme form of evolution. It's just not, right? Like that's mistaken reasoning. Will religion die out? I don't know. How do you explain the origin of consciousness without something beyond the physical? I don't think that we can answer that question until we actually know what consciousness is. Who do you think are the top theist debaters? I don't really like watch other debaters very much, except like my buddies. So I don't really know, but I'm happy to talk to anybody. Do you consider the problem of evil as one of the best arguments for atheism? It's one of the best arguments against Christianity, and a similar argument is excellent against Islam and Judaism. It's significantly less effective against a deist, right? I feel like losing faith. Go for it. Yeah, it's true. The supreme form of evolution is crabs. Quite clearly as if we now own the planet, and despite not being superior in many ways. Well, no, I mean, like, there are more ants on the planet than there are humans, by like a factor of 1,000,000. There are more trees on the planet than humans, by like a factor of 1,000. So, like, just because we're dominant doesn't mean that we're like the superior type of evolution. Like, evolution is not some is not leading towards a goal. Evolution is just a process that picks out the best of the available options. Bro, I'll try finding some good scholar and recommend them. Yeah, go for it. I think Pascal's wager is the only absolute true argument for theists, but it doesn't prove anything. It's not, because it's a false dichotomy, right? That's the problem. Where'd you attend undergrad and graduate? I'm not going to tell you. Putting aside organized religion, do you believe in some sort of spiritual element? No, I don't. And yet we can kill our entire planet? Yeah, that's true. But we could do that even if we only lived in one small country, right? Yeah, you look like an atheist? Do you mean like a intelligent person who is thoughtful? Like, I'm a complete non-believer in spiritual realm and I would still vote for Trump. Well, just because you have good epistemology on the spiritual and theistic side of things doesn't mean you have good epistemology on social and political things. The universe has no purpose. Why does it seem so finely tuned for life? Well, we are the life that could arise in a universe that is like this. So it might only seem fine-tuned, even though perhaps it's not. Your filter settings censor my question. I didn't set any filters, so like it might be TikTok's auto thing. Hey, congrats, Steve. You just completed your first science course. That's awesome. Proud of you. What's your favorite field of math? Differential geometry. Absolutely differential geometry. It's what I do. It's my day job. Well, part of my day job. I don't think anyone can convince you to believe. Is it because there are no good arguments? Because if there's no good arguments, I understand that. But if there are good arguments, then they should be able to convince me, right? I don't know who Brian Johnson is. What is differential geometry for noobs? It's the advanced calculus version of the geometry of curved surfaces. All right, we have a guest.
Hello.
Hey, chill man, how's it going?
Oh, yes, I can prove to you God exists, definitely.
All right, go ahead.
Yes, so right now I'm actually pregnant with Jesus. Just wait 9 months and you will come out and you will see Jesus, okay?
Good to know. Yeah, report back in 9 months.
Okay, and you will be accepting of Jesus and He is God and you'll become Christian.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, can you say Jesus is God for me?
Only once he comes out of you.
But He is in my body right now.
Well,
I
I
can
can't
prove.
verify that, right?
Okay, but I've literally seen Jesus tell me He is God, God exists. Are you
Well,
telling me
why
I'm
would I
lying?
believe you?
Because I am not a liar, brother. I am not a liar.
No, you might not be a liar. You might be crazy instead.
How do you know I am crazy?
Well, I mean, you're claiming that Jesus is speaking to you.
Yes, yes.
That's kind of
What
crazy.
is the problem? Okay, so if you said that, uh, why is that crazy?
Well, generally, dead people don't talk.
He came back from the dead. He is alive
Well, that's the position. I don't believe that. So why would I believe you?
because there is no contradiction if God existing and coming into human and then resurrecting Himself. It is possible. So it is
I
necessary.
don't think that's possible. Why do you think that's possible?
It is not possible for God to incarnate into a human and then die and then resurrect in Himself.
Yeah, I don't think that resurrection is possible.
You don't think resurrection is possible? What is the contradiction? If God exists, He can do that.
Yeah, physical bodies when they die are dead. That's dead is an irreversible process. That's what it means to be dead. So resurrection seems like it just contradicts the terms.
Okay, but death, you can okay, but God exists. He can do anything. He can do that.
I mean, that's the claim. I don't believe that God is real. So why would I believe
Okay,
that?
okay. Do you accept that God existing is possibly necessary for him to exist?
No.
Why not? It is possible.
I don't know if it's possible. I'm not going to grant that it's possible that some necessary being exists. Why would I grant that?
Why do you reject? What is the premise of your rejecting?
Look, if it's your argument, you should defend the argument. I'm
Yes,
not going to do
because
your argument for you. I'm not going to let you shift the burden of proof.
okay, fine, I will prove. Okay, so according to S5 axiom, God being necessary for his existence, therefore for our existence to be contingent on God's existence being necessary, therefore we exist.
Sorry, you're going to have to rephrase that because that was kind of muddled. Want to try again?
Okay, premise one. God being possibly necessary concludes that we are contingent on his necessary existence for our existence. Conclusion, God exists.
Wait, there was a conclusion in your premise?
Yes, the conclusion is that God exists.
Wait, sorry. What's the first premise? I just want the first premise.
First premise is that God is possibly necessary, therefore him being possibly necessary is necessary for his existence, for our existence. It is contingent on his existence for our existence.
Why is your premise two premises and a conclusion?
Yes, it's premises leading into a conclusion, which is the argument.
I just want the first premise. I don't want the second premise. I don't want the conclusion. I just want the first premise.
First premise is God being possibly necessary for his existence.
Okay, what's the second premise?
Second premise is, therefore, it would be contingent for our existence to be contingent on his existence for it being necessary for us to exist at the same time.
Okay, what's the conclusion?
Conclusion is, therefore, God exists by necessity for our existence.
Okay, what inference rule does that use?
Can you tell me what that means, inference rule?
Things
What do you
like
mean
modus
by that?
ponens, modus tollens. Those are the two kind of most basic syllogistic inference rules. You can also have like proof by, well, I guess modus tollens is proof by contradiction. You can have contrapositive. Like, what deductive form are you using?
Yes, S5 axiom.
Sorry, you have two premises. Which deductive form are you using to go from the first two premises to the conclusion?
First, both of them. What do you mean? I use both.
Well, because those two premises seemed unrelated. So I don't know how you can come. I don't know how you can come to a conclusion when the two premises are unrelated.
Can you prove that they are not related?
I mean, you just did a poor job explaining them if they are.
No, they are related. Trust.
Oh, okay, then explain better.
Okay, I will rephrase.
By the way, I do reject your first premise, or at least I would expect a defense of the first premise. I don't know why I would accept that. So,
what grounds do you have to reject my first premise?
That you haven't defended it.
I have defended it. I said
no. You just stated it. You didn't defend it.
Yes, my defense is the second premise.
A second premise can't be a defense of the first premise if you want to have a conclusion from the first and second premises. That's not how a syllogism works.
No, the second premise explains the first premise and defends the
Okay,
first
so
premise.
why should I believe that a god possibly necessarily exists?
Because it is possible. There's no contradiction.
Is it possible that a god necessarily does not exist?
No, because that's contradiction.
Oh, what's the contradiction?
The contradiction is that then we wouldn't exist.
Oh, okay. How does that contradict the first thing? What's the P and not P?
The P being if God necessarily does not exist, how do we exist if the P
That's
is
a question. That's a question, not a contradiction. Try again.
That is a contradiction. Okay.
What's the P? What's the not P?
Okay, P being premise that God necessarily does not exist. Not P being that we exist.
Okay, but those are not the same thing, right? Because P and not P should be the negation of the other, but us existing is not in P. So us not existing cannot be in not P.
No, because our existence is. What do you mean? I already told you. It's it's absolutely contingent on necessarily of God's existence.
Try again.
I already tried, brother.
Well, I mean, if that was your best try, then you failed. Because you didn't demonstrate a contradiction.
Okay, I'm gonna try one more time, okay? I love you so much. I love you so much, Papi. Come to Jesus, please, okay? Papi, please.
Okay, buddy.
I love you, Papi. I kiss you.
Anything else you want to do?
Yes, I just want to love you so much.
All right, bud.
You look so sexy.
Go on. How long do you think? I mean, he sounded like a legitimate theist, but then also it was like a troll the whole time, right? It was like a P and not P. P, he is a legitimate theist. Not P, he was a troll the whole time. At least that's what he thinks a contradiction is. All right, y'all. Think, how's it going?
I'm going good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. What God do you believe in?
Was raised Catholic Christian.
Is that the one that you still are? That you still believe in?
I don't really fundamentally. I don't see a difference between the gods. I just see a different sets of religion, but the fundamental idea of God as an entity, to me, it's kind of the same.
Do you believe that Jesus is God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then you're a Christian. That's fine. Anyway, so what's your best argument for the existence of a God?
I tend to not use religious arguments when it comes to this subject. I tend to think about reality as because I'm actually an engineer by training, so I know what it takes to make anything, the design, the iteration of whatever you're designing.
It's always engineers.
The point where.
So you're gonna make a design argument? Okay. So how do you know that how do you know the universe is designed?
Because to me, it takes more faith to believe that it wasn't designed than faith to believe that it's designed.
Okay, how do you know that it was designed? Or what's the evidence that it was designed?
Because I can't explain, I can't rationalize any other way for the universe to exist but for design.
So incredulity? Like it's just like I can't imagine how it could have been, and so it must be God that did it?
Let's just say, the scientific approach is being able to observe or make experiments and repeat the experiments and have the same results, right? In that
Yep.
same, if you follow that train of thought, then you can also see how you couldn't create the universe, however you want to look at it. Let's not call it God, call it something else. There's got to be some sort of entity, intelligent power, some type of engineering was required to create the
Why?
universe. If we think about the Earth in the same way that it took space
By the way,
to
there's some serious
design.
background. There's some serious background noise. Can you move to a quieter place?
Oh, sorry, I have my little man playing here. He's about to go down for a nap though.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say that when I think about let's say somebody making a machine that does something very specific, right? And in fact, the universe was much harder because for us to be able to design everything, we already have matter, we already have intelligence, we already have the laws of physics. But for you to actually create matter and the laws of physics probably takes way more intelligence. I couldn't even imagine how he did it or how it
Why
was
do you
done.
think it was created at all? Why couldn't it have just been this way?
That's a very good question. I don't know, but
So then why believe it?
Created
Why?
because I couldn't believe anything else. I mean, how could you then explain the universe if you don't create it, if you don't design it?
Suppose that
How would you explain it?
suppose that I can't give you an explanation. How does that mean that that because I can't give you an explanation, it must have been created?
It's no different than me looking at the Empire State Building and saying that because I don't know the engineer or I can't tell you the engineer, then it wasn't designed or constructed.
No,
So
but you
just
do
'cause
know
you
what
can't-
buildings
just
are.
'cause-
You do know what buildings are, so you
Yes.
can infer that a
Yes.
building is created because you know what buildings are.
Right.
We don't
Exactly.
do
And
we
that
have
is
any
my point.
No, but you're not getting it. The point is we can tell when something looks designed because we have background knowledge about the thing that we're looking at. So if I look at a car, because I know what a car is and I know how cars work and I know how cars are built, I can infer that even if there's a car I've never seen before.
No, let's say you don't even know how
Please don't
cars are
interrupt me.
built. You just-
Please don't interrupt me. I can infer
Okay, go ahead.
that it was made by a person because I know what a car is. I know who makes them. Similarly, for a building, I know how buildings are made, even if I don't know how this specific building was made. I know how buildings are made, and it's a building. We have no background knowledge about universes being made. So how can you then infer that it must have been made by somebody rather than some natural process?
So there's I look at it two ways, right? So let me use the example of cars and buildings. I could look at a car and not even know who made it or how it was made or if it was made, but I do know that it was made because it couldn't have.
I don't think
existed
that's true.
otherwise.
I don't think that's true.
Well, that
so
has to be true.
let me give you an example then. Let's say that a blob of metal or a blob of something, you don't even know what it is,
Right.
like just some like weird shape, crash lands in your front yard from space. You've never seen it before. You have no idea what it is. You have no idea where it came from or what it's made out of. Can you figure out if it's designed or not?
If the blob of metal is designed or not.
Yeah, how do you figure out if
Is
it's
that-
designed or not?
The fact that it actually exists is enough for me to extrapolate that it was designed. Just because I don't know how it was designed, just because I don't know when it was designed or for what
So
purpose.
okay, so you don't
Doesn't-
actually have any standards for determining whether something is designed.
Well, I do because they exist. Existence
wait,
has to be designed.
Oh, okay, so you're begging the question. Why should I believe that existence should be begging the question? Sorry, why should I believe that existence means that it's designed?
Because it wouldn't make sense otherwise if you use simple rationalization. Like how? Okay. Let me then put it to you this way. How then could you explain the universe and all its intricacies? How then do you explain the fact that we have gravity, we have mass, we have consciousness, we have life? How then do you explain that? Just the fact that it exists, how could that be?
Suppose that I don't have an explanation. That doesn't therefore mean it's designed.
what I think it's happening here is you trying to if you're not able to identify and characterize the design and the designer, then you basically are saying that it wasn't designed just because you can characterize
no, I'm not.
how or why.
No, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying.
That's okay.
That's a mischaracterization.
So what are you saying?
What I'm saying is, if you're going to make the claim that it is designed, you have to prove it. You can't just ask me to prove that it isn't.
Well, I could put it to you the same way. Then you have to. I could put it to you the same way. Then you have to then tell me how it's not designed.
I'm not the one making the claim. You're the one who's trying to prove that God exists by saying that the universe is designed. I'm saying I don't believe you, so you have to provide evidence if you want to convince me of this.
Okay, let's make progress. Okay, what kind of evidence would you accept as evidence of design?
Well, first I would like some sort of criteria that you could use to evaluate whether a thing was designed or not. So, like, maybe if it has sharp angular corners, then we know it's more likely to be designed. Or maybe if it has a whole bunch of different complex chemical structures or something, then maybe we know that it's more likely. Just some sort of criteria would be good. Some sort of way that we could test whether a thing was designed or not.
Okay, I'm going to use the analogy of food to help you understand why I believe that the universe was designed. You know, there's a lot of time whenever you want to prepare food, you need to know what ingredients to use, but you also need to know how to use the ingredients, correct?
Sure.
Because you could have, let's say, right, okay. If you accept that, then I would say we have two things. We have the ingredients that make up the universe that we so far understand. We understand that we have matter, we understand force, we understand things like gravity, we understand things like speed, we understand things like particles and things like that. The fact that they are organized in the way they are is a telltale sign that it was designed, isn't it?
So what's the necessary and sufficient criteria to determine if something is designed?
The fact that you have ingredients, which I'll call the ingredients of the universe, call it matter, call it I don't know, black holes, forces, the fact that things are moving in a certain specific way, elliptical motion of planets and things like that. So you have matter, and then you have the way in which the matter is actually organized. The fact that you have
any sort of material organization counts as design?
Yes.
So what if everything was completely random with no organizational structure, but it still had an arrangement? Would it then be designed?
Wait, you say I'm confused. Wait, can you ask that question again? Because the
question
is
so
a
what
little
if
bit confusing. It's
what
like
if the what if you entered a room,
right.
and in that room there were things just strewn about all over the place with no rhyme or reason? Would that be designed?
Would what be designed? The fact that
the room
exists,
would the room be designed?
Yeah, the room will be designed, because if it wasn't designed, it wouldn't.
Okay, so what was
room in the first place?
Then what was the criteria? If I thought the criteria was some sort of organization, but if I just said that in the room it's just completely strewn about with no rhyme or reason for the organization, that also counts as designed. So it can't be that a thing is organized makes it designed, because you just said that something that was disorganized is also designed.
Well, yeah, my argument was never around like a specific type of organization. The fact
Yes,
that
it was. That's literally what you said.
Let me put it this way. When you say organized, because even chaos, even what we call in energy physics, what's the name, entropy, right? The fact that you have chaos and entropy is not evidence of not design. It's evidence of design.
Okay, so you don't have a criteria for design then. What's the criteria for design?
The fact that we exist, the fact that just the mere fact that we have matter. Because
okay, so you're just saying, so to be clear, your argument is just, well, if there's matter, then there must be design? Is because that can't be a criteria for establishing whether the thing is designed or not, because everything is that way. So we can't use that to like distinguish between designed and undesigned things.
Well, let me take you a step back. When you say everything is that way, what is everything? Why is there everything?
Why are you asking why is there anything at all? I don't know.
You do realize that you do realize that
Do you
there's
know?
no such a thing as, well, yeah, because they
Why does God
exist, but
exist rather than
somebody,
nothing at all?
because we can't prove nothing. The idea of nothing, the, the idea of nothing is a little bit insane
Okay,
because there's
I
no such
agree.
thing
So
as
then there has
nothing.
to be a universe. I agree.
Well, so there has to be to us because we exist. I don't really know how to put this. So there could be, it could be that nothing exists, but then
Could there?
something does exist. It, if you look at the universe as an entity, right? Like the universe is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
If we accept that the universe is a thing, then you start analyzing the universe, you start asking questions, you start probing the universe. You eventually get to where you ask, well, why? Why does it even exist in the first place? Or how does it even exist? There has to
Mm-hmm.
be some kind of, maybe it's because we're using the word God. Pick your
I
identifier.
don't care. I don't care what word you use. Like, it doesn't matter
Okay,
to
you
me
don't
what
care
word you
what
use.
right. Because I at some point in my life I want to say I was a little bit more agnostic, even though I grew up Christian, and I had to I kind of found my way back, because even if you're not a religious person, even if you don't pray or believe in I want to say spirituality, right? There's two things that that prove very compelling. The fact that if you look out through history, every culture that has existed before us understood spirituality and understood that there were entities that were not
Okay.
necessarily physical.
3,000 years
That's
ago,
one thing.
3,000 years ago, everybody thought the Earth was flat.
That
People
doesn't
can be
mean that we're
wrong.
right about everything. Okay, that's true. They can be wrong, but the other thing that it seems very compelling to me is the fact that there's a lot of, and I'm not saying that just because some other person believed in God, that's why I believe in God, but there's a lot of very thoughtful, intelligent people that have existed, that have walked the earth before me, that I believe were much smarter than I am, and came to this exact same conclusion. And then it
And
comes to me, and then I look around.
there are a lot of very, very intelligent people who also came to the opposite conclusion. Famously, Stephen Hawking was a diehard atheist until the day he died.
Yeah, I heard about that, but I guess the point I'm making is, and this is not like a Pascal wager type of argument, is more of a rational argument. In the same way that you say, just because you can't prove, just because I can't point to God and show you God and then have you ask him the questions and him being able to prove to you that he created the universe, is not sufficient for me to dismiss the fact that this God or this entity or this original creator, person, or entity exists. Because I just look at this at the most simple, what we even call advanced technology. I mean, you couldn't have a laptop if you didn't have an engineer that made the laptop. Now we do have an understanding as
What
to
about
how they made
rocks?
the laptop.
You could have a rock without an engineer.
So but what does a rock, no, well, that doesn't change anything. What
Sure,
do
it
you mean
does.
by
It
you
seems
have
like a rock is not very designed.
well, a rock is matter. A rock has mass, and you can use a rock to do all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
So the argument is more of a totalitarian argument from the perspective of, if you look at the universe as an entity, as something that exists and that works in a very specific way, that you can characterize maybe by the fact that it has
Oh, it's
matter,
the
it has,
conclusion again.
well, what do you mean by the
You're
conclusion?
just assuming that a god exists in order to dismiss my criticism that rocks aren't designed.
No, rocks are part of the design, not that they aren't
How do you
designed. They're
know?
part of a
How
lot,
do you know they're part of the design?
because they exist in the universe and we can see them.
Oh, it was the conclusion again. I'm asking you,
Well, you're
how do
not
you
making
know it's
sense.
designed? You just keep asserting that it's designed. How do you know it's designed?
I'm not I'm not saying that rocks. I mean, there's a bunch of rocks out the door. And if I go out, I'll probably see a bunch of rocks. I'm not saying that God took time to design rocks. I'm saying He designed the universe
I know,
where
that's the
rocks happen
claim.
to
I
be in
don't
it.
believe you. Give me some evidence.
So then it goes back to my question: what kind of evidence would you accept
I gave
as
you
proof?
some. A criterion that we can use to distinguish between designed and undesigned things. And then we could use that to check if the universe is designed.
Well, you in that case, if you want to go with that criteria, then you always be looking at a subset of the universe. You wouldn't be looking at the
Oh, okay,
universe.
so
That's
there's
why I
no
keep talking
criteria
about.
that might apply to the universe? It sounds like there's no way to check if the universe is
No,
designed or not.
no. Well, there's a way to check. The very first criteria is existence. I would say the fact that it exists. Okay,
But things could
that
exist
could be
without
a
being
design.
designed.
Show me show. Well, what do you mean things? Well, if there was no design of the universe, then the universe and everything in it, including rocks and people and animals, would not exist.
Why
To
should I
me,
believe that?
existence is one of the because it exists, because you can see it.
Why
The
why should I
fact that
believe
it's
that things
there.
why should I believe that you couldn't have things exist without design?
Because how would you show me something?
That's
Show me.
just an argument from incredulity.
No, what? I'm sorry, I don't know what that word that
What it means
the
is that
word you
is
just said
that
means.
your argument is just I can't think of a way that I could be wrong, therefore I must be right.
Oh, that's what that means.
Yeah.
And that's not. Think about a scientific method, right? Most of the people that made discoveries in history, you I kind of know this because I've tried a few things. I've tried to invent things. So you kind of go off of intuition. Like you have an something. It's like an idea. Something comes to mind. Say,
Yeah,
well,
and then you have
if
to
we
test
do
the
this,
idea. So how do you test
yeah,
the
and you
idea
have
that
to.
the universe is
Yeah.
designed?
Well, the first of my first criteria, you asked me, I would say it's existence. Now,
No, but
once you
that was
once
how
you
you can. Sorry. Okay. You can't use
okay,
the
that's the first.
observation that led you to the hypothesis in order to justify the hypothesis. You need something else to justify the hypothesis
Okay,
because the
fair.
fact that we exist is what
However,
led you to that hypothesis.
that is fair, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, but to
I'd
me,
hope not
that
because I'm
is
right.
that. Well, to me, the fact that we have existence is to me is the most compelling evidence. But there's a whole bunch of other things that you can test. You were asking for different things that we could
Yeah, I
test
want a
with.
criteria.
Okay, okay. So we have existence. We have things like you know consciousness. That's another evidence of
But there are things
of
without consciousness in the universe, so those things wouldn't be designed, right?
no. Everything in the universe is there by design.
Well, that's the
Wait, so
claim.
so
I'm asking you for criteria that we can use to check that the universe is designed and that the things in the universe are designed.
I've given you one criteria. I said we have existence,
Yeah,
and
that
the
was the
second thing I've mentioned.
observation. So now we need a way to test that hypothesis that you
So,
derived
in
from that
other words,
observation.
you're rejecting that criteria. You're saying that's not a good enough criteria
Well,
because
it's not a
there's
criteria that we could use to determine whether a thing is designed or not, because just by having a thing, it's automatically in existence. And so it's not a criteria that distinguishes between things, right? A criteria needs to distinguish between things that are and things that aren't.
no, that is a criteria because so here's one of our limiting
A
factors.
criteria
Our limiting
so
factor.
look, a criteria is supposed to divide the world into two parts: things that match the criteria and things that don't match the criteria. Under
Yeah, and
the
no, I
criteria that
understand.
the criteria that you've given, everything falls into that criteria. There's nothing
Yeah,
outside that criteria. So
you're
it
right.
doesn't
You're
divide the
correct.
world into two parts.
Well, it doesn't necessarily divide the world, but just because it doesn't, that
Then it's
doesn't
not a
necessarily
criteria.
divide the
It's
world.
just not a criteria.
Well,
Criteria divide the
it
world into
is.
two pieces. That's just what a criteria
No, it
does.
is.
It's not a criteria if it doesn't.
No. I understand. However, we're trying to identify the creator of the world as we know it, and we couldn't divide the world in order to prove that somebody created the world. Let me put it this way. I understand why you don't like that criteria just because we don't have the everything will fit in that set. So there's not an alternate set of nothing where you could say,
There's no
okay,
way to
this
check
is
this against our intuition. So
right.
so
Well, I get it.
so
I
so I
get
don't
it.
know why I should believe that that's a useful way of determining if something is designed.
Okay, I get it. You don't like that criteria.
Well, I
I
mean,
still
consider
stand
this.
by.
If I said that, let's say that I said that everything is, if it exists, it's not designed. And then I said, everything's exist, therefore it fits into the criteria of not being designed.
But you
That's
would be
proof, right?
wrong though.
Why is that
You would
wrong?
be wrong
Why is that wrong?
because it takes design to create.
Oh, why should I believe that?
What would you be able to create if you don't design it? That is actually
I,
useful.
I,
That is
I could
that
just,
has purpose.
I could just close my eyes and then just like smear my hand on a wall, and that's not designed. There's nothing intentional there, but there's still, a shape on the wall, right?
But that doesn't. So what difference does that make?
It's
My
not
argument
designed.
still
It's not
stands.
designed. It's an accident.
So I'll call it chaos, call it entropy. Just because something is designed doesn't mean that within that entity that is designed, you're not gonna have things that don't necessarily make sense or things that are not useful to you or as you see it. It may or may not be useful. It may or may not make sense to some people. The example you use is an example of art. I get it. Art is
No,
something
it
that
wasn't
some
art. It
people.
was specifically not art. It was just a smear on the wall.
Well, it's in the context of art. Let
No,
me
it's
put it
not.
that
It's
way
not. It's
because
literally not art. It's not on a canvas. It's not being displayed anywhere. I literally just dipped my hand in a bucket of unknown liquid and I smeared it on the wall.
and you did that for no reason at all, right?
Yeah, I was just
So
bored. I was just
it's
bored. Or better yet, I was
I
drunk,
think
and it wasn't. I didn't even do it on purpose.
I think up until you are able to internalize that existence is the most compelling evidence of God, you wouldn't be able to get anywhere because if you don't accept that as a criterion, then you find yourself analyzing segments of reality or segments of the universe, and that you would always find let me say you would always you would almost be like looking at a system instead of analyzing the system as in its entirety. You're looking at components of that system and arguing that because maybe this component doesn't make sense to me or it fails
Yeah. So
or
unless you can design,
it
unless you can defend the idea that if a thing exists, then it is designed. Why I just shouldn't believe you, right?
yeah, but then the thing we're talking about in its entirety is the universe. You're trying to analyze parts of the universe and
But
try
then,
to
so
explain
so
which
is there a way I can actually test whether whether the criteria, if it exists, then it's designed? Is there a way that I can test if that's the correct criteria?
yeah, of
Okay,
course.
how do I
I
test
mean,
it?
does it exist?
No, how do I test if that's the correct criteria?
How do you test if that's
Because
the correct
for example, I could say, well, if it exists, then it's red. And I could test that. I could go find something and be like, aha, this exists. It's not red, so the criteria is wrong. Or I could say, if it exists, then it's not designed. Well, how would you test that? How would you check that that's wrong?
you wouldn't be able to in this case because everything
Right,
that
so it's
you're
a bad
going to do
criteria.
would no, it's not a bright criteria. It's a fundamental criteria for
Okay, but
existence.
if
It's a
you can't
fundamental criteria.
verify it, if you can't verify it, I'm just not going to believe you. Because at that point, it's just trust me, bro.
In some ways, you could say yes. It's just trust me, bro. And
Okay,
I
and I
would
don't
also
trust you.
say
Sorry. You seem like a lovely guy,
no.
but I don't trust you.
No, I understand. Yeah, that's fair. But at the same time, you have to realize that just because you don't have direct evidence of something, you don't have like let me Yeah, well, direct evidence, or let's say conclusive evidence of
Any
something.
evidence, how about?
Okay, I mean we're getting caught up on the existence, but I mentioned a second criteria which I call consciousness. Another one would be life
Yeah, but
altogether.
consciousness doesn't apply to everything in the universe. Therefore, it can't be that everything is designed if that's the criteria.
That's why you have to start with existence, because once you acknowledge that the fact that
Okay.
everything
But I'm
exists
not
is
going to accept
because
that that's the criteria unless you can demonstrate it for me, unless you can give me a reason to think that it's actually a good criteria.
it's almost like you're asking me to prove that matter was created. How would you prove
Yes,
that to
that's what I'm
somebody?
asking you to prove. Yeah.
Because any evidence that you want to provide almost requires matter to prove that matter exists, or requires to use some aspect of matter, be it energy, be it consciousness, or something.
Yeah,
So
look,
it's
that
very
is the
it's
question. You're trying to claim that anything that's made of matter was designed. So I'm asking you to prove that.
no. What I'm saying is that matter itself was designed.
That's the question that I'm asking you to prove.
So, well, how then? How? It's very, and I get where you're coming from. However, I want you to understand that what you're asking for is to prove something without, and that the thing that you're trying to prove is it's almost like the thing that you're trying to prove is at a very fundamental level of everything. So you can't go beyond that to prove itself. Everything else is contained within that circle. So you can't go
Great, so you
outside of
can't
that
prove
set.
it. So why should I believe it?
So
You can't even
if
provide
I'm not
evidence for
able,
it, actually. I don't even require proof, just evidence would be good.
matter itself is evidence of it's evidence of design,
Oh,
because
it's the claim
if you don't,
again. I actually want the evidence, not the claim.
and we've established that what you're calling evidence, or what you're calling, either you provide evidence, you said you wanted criteria that
Some sort
we're
of
going to be
criteria
able
that we
to
could
use.
use to establish the evidence, or some sort of external evidence, or just some evidence of any
Well,
kind,
I think
really.
you just don't like my criteria because it's
Yeah,
overwhelmingly
I don't
misconforming.
accept that your criteria is the correct one because it seems like there's no way to check if it's correct.
No, you can check everywhere. It's
No,
easy to
you
check.
can't check. So again,
You're asking
I
for something
I
that is
I asked
complicated when
you,
the answer is actually easy.
I asked you, how can you check if that's the correct criteria? And you said you can't. You can't check it. So why should I use that as my criterion?
No, you can. You just don't like it. You can.
Wait, how do you check it? How do you check that that's the correct criterion? What's the process? What's the test?
The most fundamental test is existence, and
No.
then
What's the test
once you
to
go,
check if existence is the correct criterion for design?
how do you check if something exists? That's what you're
Well,
asking.
no. I'm asking you, how do you check that if it exists, then it's designed? How do you check that? How do you check that conditional statement?
Because I've already established that anything that exists in the universe must have been designed by
You
whoever
haven't
designed the
established
universe.
that. That's the
Therefore, if
claim.
maybe I'm not communicating, what are you saying? Because I've already said that by my, I was gonna say by my, not by my, in my opinion, the universe must have been created. Therefore, what is, so if that is my claim, now the question becomes, okay, what is the universe? The universe is really, this place where you have matter, you have mass, you have forces, you have life forms,
Yeah.
you have motion, you have light, you have energy, and all these things. Okay,
Right.
that's how you can characterize the universe. So how could that then exist if nobody designed it?
Asking a question isn't evidence. You gotta give an argument here.
The argument is the nature of these things, the nature of matter, the nature of molecules, the nature of atoms, the nature of everything that we can physically probe in the known universe tells me that it was designed. How else do
The
you
argument
have
is
it?
vibes.
It's not vibes. In
Then
the
what's the
same
actual
way that
argument?
so the argument, in the same way that we established earlier when we started this conversation that if you see a car, you would know that that car was designed because there is no other way the car would
No,
be able to see
that's
that
not what
car
we
driving.
established. Sorry, that's not what we
What did
established.
we
We
establish?
established that
What did
we
we
know
say?
that the car is designed because we have background knowledge about the car.
Like, okay, who made the car?
Or
When
you
it was
know,
made?
how cars are made, maybe. Maybe we've seen a documentary 10 years ago about how cars were made. So we have background knowledge. That's how we establish whether a thing is designed, with background knowledge. We have no background knowledge for the universe.
Okay, let's okay, let me play it out. Let's say we had zero background knowledge on how the car was made. We had
Mhm.
zero background knowledge on the fact that you needed metal, the fact that you needed cables, the fact that you needed
You have
screens,
zero
and the fact
background
that you
knowledge about
needed
cars at all. How about that? You know
yes,
nothing
okay,
about
yeah.
cars.
Let's say you have
Yeah.
you have zero background and you see a car. Do you think it's made or do you think it's just random?
I would have no idea because I don't even know what I'm looking at.
Okay, okay, I granted you that. So then the question becomes: Is that car? Does it have a designer? Does it have a maker?
I would have no idea because I don't know anything about it.
I understand that. I get it. But now I'm asking you, it's true you have no idea, but then if the question comes, was this car made or does it just exist at random?
If you asked me and I didn't have any background knowledge, I would tell you I don't know. I need a cricket sound effect. You there? Oh, he left. Okay, let's bring on another guest. That was unfortunately not very productive. By the way, all, if you want to support me, there's a bunch of ways you can do it. You could join the Discord server. You could you could like the live. You could, whether you're watching on TikTok or on YouTube. There's also like financial ways to support me if you want. Of course, you don't have to, but like super chats, all these things are always welcome, especially because I will have large moving expenses in the near future. That will be a pain. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. What God do you believe in?
I believe in Jesus, so I'm an evangelical Christian, and I just wanted to touch on your points from the last conversation that you guys are having. I think complexity and organization, fine tuning argument, and universal laws are some criteria that you might have been looking for. I don't really want to get into that, but just it was interesting to hear that as well. But can I ask you a question before we get started?
Sure can.
So, when you say you're an atheist,
Mm-hmm.
can you give me some background on what extent you mean by that? So, for
I
example,
don't believe in a God.
Right. So you're asserting that there is no God.
No, I'm telling you that I don't believe in a God.
So that you're more so agnostic than saying I don't know if there is, but if
I
there
have
was
been
one,
convinced that it is likely there is no God.
got it. Okay, no, that makes sense. And so, if Christianity was true, would you become a Christian?
It depends on what kind of Christianity, I guess. Like there are some flavors of Christianity that are like more morally acceptable than others. In my view, like if universalism ended up being true, then I'd be like, yeah, I could get on board with that because universalism is at least like kind of chill. But if it was like Calvinism or some shit like that, like probably not.
Okay, so it's more evidentiary, or like evidence based, but it's also a little bit emotional.
Well, look,
in terms of your atheism.
Not quite. So if God was real, or if Christianity was true, that wouldn't mean that I have to like Jesus or worship Jesus or love God, right? Especially if that God is like a hateful, evil son of a bitch. Like, I could acknowledge that it exists and still not like it, right? That wouldn't make me a Christian. If it was true, if it turned out to be true, I would acknowledge that it exists. But then whether or not I become a Christian to like profess my faith and all of this stuff, that depends on whether or not this is something I want to endorse.
No, that makes sense. Okay, so that makes sense. But I'm just saying from my perspective, like if something were true, I would want to know what that truth is, and then would want to conform to that religion. So, like for my
Why?
example, I'm a
What is?
Christian.
What if? Hold on. What if the
Yeah.
religion was that? What if the real God was like an evil, most like the ultimately evil being that just wanted to watch people suffer? You would worship that?
So that's a good question. I don't think necessarily, but I think from the perspective that I'm talking from, the Christian God is a good, loving God. So
Well, that's why I said
in
it
that
depends on the
sense-
version of Christianity that's correct.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious because I just wanted to get a perspective of where your mind was at and what you're thinking as an atheist. So there's a couple things that I wanted to just give as my arguments for Christianity and Jesus.
Sure.
The first one would just be that the person of Jesus. So Jesus of Nazareth, sorry, he was a real person. I think we
I agree.
can both agree that any historical scholar is going to say yes, he
Most
existed.
of them will, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, most of them will. Yeah, exactly. He existed and he died on a cross. Now,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
probably
the
true.
point that we can disagree on is you would say, well, I don't believe he rose from the dead. I would say
Yep.
I do believe that. And so I think the person of Jesus is a huge component of that because we know he existed. The only part that we disagree on is whether or not he was raised from the dead. And so my thought process and my argument for that would be, well, all of his followers then went to die for that truth. They believe that he did die on the cross. So like Peter, for example, was crucified as well. And so not a lot of times will people die for a lie, but
how do we
I'm
know
saying-
that Peter was crucified?
Historical documentation.
Which historical documentation?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but there
So
are
I
historical
can tell you
documents that-
I can tell you what the historical documentation is for that all of the apostles went to their deaths for believing this. The historical documentation is church tradition. Like that's it.
Church.
Like there's no external verification of any of this. It's just kind of like this is what the church says is true.
So I'm pretty sure that that's a historical fact that those did die.
No, I mean obviously they died, right? Because
I mean,
it was
that-
2,000
that's
years
like
ago. But
saying,
like it's not at all
brothers
clear
is-
that. So there seems to be some. So there seems to be some historical evidence that at least that two of them were executed. We don't know why they were executed, but there seems to be some historical evidence that two of them were executed. I think it's Peter and James, or maybe no, it might be Paul and it's one of the P's. But we don't know why they were executed. We don't know anything about the other apostles. Is it Paul and James? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
But the point is we don't know why they were executed. We don't know how they were executed. We don't have any external documentation of any of this.
All of the the Gospels, and then Acts, Corinthians. Yeah, you have that historical documentation in the Bible that shows, okay, well, they were going out preaching the gospel. I feel like it's a pretty good assertion, and I guess we could say, well, maybe that's not 100% true, but it's a pretty good assertion to say that they died for their faith. And so if
Why?
they were, because
I mean, consider the alternative. Perhaps they were executed for, I don't know, treason? For betraying the Romans? For, I don't know, fomenting a rebellion? Like, it could have been that too.
Well, it was more so the Jews of the time who were torturing the Christians because they didn't
regardless,
believe that they believed.
regardless, the point is they could have been executed for a slew of different reasons, some of which are secular, some of which are religious. We don't know which ones are which.
Say that again?
They could have been executed, like these two that we do have some historical evidence for that were actually executed. They could have been executed for political reasons, or for legal reasons, or for just for hateful reasons, or it could have been for religious reasons. We just don't know.
Sure. I think it's way more likely that they were dying for religious reasons than anything else.
Why?
So because they were preaching the gospel. The same reason that Jesus died on a cross was because they.
I mean, maybe it was illegal to have large gatherings, and they kept breaking the law, so they got executed for that.
I'll pull up that and here in a second. But I guess the second point that I wanted to make, other than Jesus's life, death, and resurrection, was that we have prophetic evidence as well. So Psalm 22. If you read those verses, Psalm 22 verse 16, dogs have surrounded me, a band of evil men has encircled me, they have pierced my hands and feet. So that was written around 1000 BC. And that was when Roman crucifixion wasn't even a method. And then
it doesn't say anything about crucifixion in the psalm, right?
But so I can count all my bones, people staring gloat over me, they divide my garments among them and cast lots.
It doesn't say crucifixion though, does it?
It points to the crucifixion. Let me see if I can find a verse.
Points to getting pierced.
Yeah, they pierced my hands and feet.
Although my understanding is that the translation is actually probably better, like they dug at my hands and feet, or like a lion at my hands and feet. There's debate over that particular word, because the oldest extant version that we have from the Dead Sea Scrolls is actually, there's a mistake in the text. Like it's not the word that's rendered is not a real word, so it's actually not clear what was trying to be said.
You're saying that this psalm written by David.
So this particular word, this particular word, the word pierce, that shows up in Psalm 22:16. The oldest copy that we have of that psalm was from the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? The trouble is if you go look at that particular verse in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the word that's actually rendered where English translations put the word pierce is not a Hebrew word, right? It could be a Hebrew word if one of the letters changed, and if one of the letters changed, then it could be like a lion, or it could be dug, but we just don't know. It's some sort of typo, and we just don't know what was intended to be put there.
Sure, I feel like even if the translation is not necessarily what it intended, everything surrounding that context really points to the same meaning. If it says have everything there that's in the Gospels, so pierced, dug into, whatever you're trying to say.
What if it's like a lion at my hands and feet?
You're saying it means like a lion at my hands and feet?
Ka'aru would be the word, or would be the phrase like a lion, or ka'ari rather, and that's one of the possible correct renderings of the text. In fact, this is what the Masoretic text has as the translation. But importantly, if it says dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircle me, like a lion at my hands and my feet, well, the whole crucifixion narrative completely goes out the window, because now there's nothing about crucifixion in this text.
I would disagree with that. I think that's outside. I think that's more unlikely of a take. Now, you could be right. I'll give you that. But I would say that it most likely means pierce. Why would we have...
Well, it certainly doesn't mean pierce, by the way. The word is translated as pierced, so that's not a correct translation. If the word is not ka'aru, which means like a lion, if it's the other rendering, then it means something like they dug at my hands and feet. Not dug into, dug at. And that would check out, considering they're talking about dogs in the sentence, right? And dogs dig.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I don't agree with that at all, just because I feel like when you read these verses, it is very evident that it is talking about the crucifixion, especially when you read the
what other verse remotely sounds like crucifixion?
All of my bones, people stare and gloat over me.
What do counting your bones have to do with crucifixion?
Because when you're crucified, your bones are sticking out of your body.
Why would your bones be sticking out of your body when you're crucified?
Have you read into crucifixion?
Well, I'm just thinking about the anatomical details. Your bones aren't broken. Your bones. Some of your bones are broken, but they're not sticking out of your body. Why would they be Why would they be sticking out of your body? They drove nails through his wrists and feet. Why would bones be sticking out?
Yeah, as he's holding up himself, it's likely that his wrists were torn out. Like you're
Does it say
pushing
that anywhere
yourself
in the
up to
Gospels that that's actually what happened?
No, but when you think about a Roman crucifixion, you can have an idea of what that's going to look
All
like.
of the depictions of Roman
I mean,
crucifixions that I've seen don't have bones sticking out. So it seems kind of like a stretch.
okay. So what about they divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing?
Yeah,
That's
so
a clear reference as well.
I don't think
So,
that that's
I mean,
actually like I don't, by the way, I don't think that that's actually like a confirmed thing that Romans did. I think that probably the reason that appears in the gospel is because they were referencing this psalm.
that we're referencing the psalm, or it actually happened.
Yeah, and we have no way of determining which one.
Okay. I disagree with that. Just I think you're drawing this out more so than it needs to be.
I mean, you were the one who brought up the verse.
No, I agree. I mean, I just think you're trying to nitpick these different aspects, and
I mean, it's important. If if this is a famously bad translation, then I should bring that up, right?
I don't believe it is a famously bad translation.
This is literally one of the most contentious translations in the entire Bible. Like there are entire books written about it.
Which books are you referring to?
Like scholarly books about like what's going on in this verse.
Yeah,
that might be a little bit of a hyperbole, but this is like widely discussed amongst biblical scholars, like this particular translation, to try to figure out what's going on. Because this is really something where we don't actually know what the original text was saying.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you letting me know that. And can you tell me some of those books that you're referring to?
Yeah, I was being hyperbolic with the books, but I can name scholars for you if you want. Sure. And there's actually a creator on TikTok. You probably know him, Dan McClellan, who has several videos on this. I think Bart Ehrman also has talked about this several times. I could probably go find some like other academics who have written on this. But if you just go to Google Scholar and you type in Psalm 22 verse 16, you'll find like hundreds of things.
All right, I know Bart Ehrman, so I'll take a look at some of his writings on that. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about was just you had mentioned that science and design. So I'm just curious. So, like for example, hundreds of years ago, atheists would have believed, and I think all scientists would have believed, that the universe was eternal. And then with Edwin Hubble, we understood that the Big Bang, came into existence. The universe came into existence. So, in Genesis, when it says,
well, at least that was the belief until like the mid 80s, late 80s.
Correct. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, since some aspects of science have been wrong, and then the Bible has always said that the universe began to exist, do you believe that there's anything else that scientists or atheists have been wrong about?
Probably, yeah. The great thing about the scientific process is that it is inherently self-updating. Like that's the whole goal, like to get more and more accurate information, right? The trouble with the Bible is that it will never be updated. At least if you're a Christian. If you're Muslim, then you think, oh, it has been updated. If you're a Mormon, then you think, oh, it has been updated, right? But it will never be updated. So the things that it gets wrong, it will be wrong about forever.
Right. And could you name some of those for me? Like,
for example, it says that in Genesis 1, it describes the creation of events, the creation of things. And it says, among other things, it says that plants were created on day 3, and the sun was created on day 4, saying that plants are older than the sun. It also says that birds were created on day 5, and land animals were created on day 6, meaning that birds came before land animals. Both of those things are obviously false. There's a whole bunch of like historical.
How are those obviously false?
How do plants exist without the sun?
You're saying plants exist without the sun? Well, because God gives them growth. I mean, if God exists, that's not necessarily
I mean, then you're just disagreeing with like the entire field of biology, I guess.
I think what you're saying though is you're just saying, okay, well, everything exists in a natural process here on Earth, but you're not leaving room for any type of miracles. So, for example, if Jesus did rise again, you would have to say, okay, well, that does not align to natural processes as we know them to be today.
Yeah, sorry. So would you say that when God created the universe, he created natural laws, right?
Correct. And a miracle would be something that's outside of those natural laws.
So when he created those natural laws, were they perfect?
I would say yes. I'm not sure what context you're referring to.
Just like, so perfect in all of the ways that you can think of, right? So if they were perfect, then it would be imperfect to break them. Correct?
I wouldn't say imperfect outside of like a morality standpoint.
I'm not making like a moral judgment here. I'm like talking about like the you know, the beauty or the accuracy or the simplicity or whatever.
Break moral laws. I don't know that I would say that that is imperfect.
Well, but then the moral... Sorry, I wasn't talking about moral laws. I was talking about physical laws. Did I say moral laws?
I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm a little confused. The physical laws, I wouldn't say that those would be necessarily... I don't know that perfect and imperfect is the right word to describe that.
Presumably, everything that God creates is perfect, right?
Yeah, so to go outside... But
to go outside of that creation would then be imperfect. Because you can't be better than the perfect thing.
Sure, but you're kind of referring to God and humans. So, for example,
no, I'm not.
Like the natural laws that we can obtain isn't necessarily.
I'm just talking about the natural laws that God created. I'm not talking about like the human, whatever humans are thinking about. I'm just like, presumably you think that there are natural laws for this universe that God made. Whatever they might be, maybe we don't know them yet, but whatever they might be.
Sure, but that's...
So, and those must be perfect, because God's a perfect creator.
Correct.
And so if there is such a thing as some event that violates those natural laws that God created, well then those natural laws couldn't have been perfect. Or violating those natural laws wouldn't be perfect.
But what if you're talking about natural laws for God? So the natural laws for God...
I'm not talking about natural laws for God. I'm just talking about like the natural laws of our universe that God created.
It just seems like you're bringing in like a morality aspect to this. Like I don't know that perfect natural laws.
So okay, let me give an analogy.
Broken. That's just...
Let me give an analogy.
Yeah, sure.
Let's say I'm an engineer, right? And let's say I'm the best engineer in the world. I'm the best engineer in the universe. I design a perfect I don't know. Let's say I design a perfect television, right? Mm-hmm. It can do anything that you want it to do in the exact way that you need it to do it, right? It's the perfect television. It has no flaws. It's the best television that you could ever hope for. It's obviously not a printer because it's television, but it's the perfect television. Now, so I design this television. It goes out to production, and then something happens. Somebody calls in and asks for a repairman to come out, and the repairman says, "Oh yeah, just tweak this this television a little bit, and now it'll work exactly as you want it to, and it'll go back to normal." It would mean it's not perfect, right?
I think a better comparison would be more so like regular versus like irregular. Like irregular. Like, I don't know that perfect's the word that I would use there. Now, I understand what you're saying. If we were to talk that natural laws were perfect and imperfect, then yes, I would agree with you. But I don't necessarily agree with the analogy. I think regular would be more of a word because, when I talk about perfect, I think more about morality than natural law.
Well, we could talk about simplicity. We could talk about beauty. We could talk about efficaciousness. We can talk about we can talk about like why don't we talk about like beauty and simplicity and power. Like all like it doesn't have to be moral, but like it has the most of those qualities. They're the most beautiful natural laws. They're the most elegant natural laws. The most efficacious natural laws. All of these things, but if they need to be violated every once in a while, then either they're not perfect or violating them isn't perfect. If God created a perfect universe, he shouldn't need to violate the rules of the universe every once in a while.
That's an interesting point. I think, maybe it was ingrained with the part of natural laws. Maybe it's just not something that we observe regularly. So we're saying instead of it being perfect, it's imperfect, but maybe it's really not even imperfect at all. It's just not a regularity that we see within the universe. I saw an interesting point on the comments. Somebody saying I was misrepresenting Genesis, and I just kind of want to hear your thoughts about this. So, Genesis 1, it was in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. We were talking about the Big Bang. If God spoke the world into existence, would you agree that that almost sounds like the Big Bang and how things were to happen? Like, I don't necessarily think
No.
us as theists or like me as a theist and you as an atheist, I don't think we have to be saying, okay, the Big Bang and God speaking. Like, that's exactly what I would think it would look like if God spoke the world into existence, would be the Big Bang.
Why would God speaking the world into existence mean that something rapidly expanded?
I'm not saying it necessarily means that. I'm just saying that's what I would imagine. If
I would think that it would just
scientifically-
spontaneously appear. Like, in the way
Is
that it
that
is.
in the way that it is. Clarify what you mean by that.
Yeah, like fully formed, it would just spontaneously appear.
In what way is that difference between
Well, because like
Big Bang to
like
expanding?
stars didn't exist yet, galaxies didn't exist yet, the universe was very small, it didn't even have matter in it yet. It didn't appear fully formed.
Right. So it began to expand. The universe began, and then we have an expansion.
Well,
And
to be clear, the Big Bang doesn't actually imply that the universe began to exist. It just implies that it began to expand. But we can talk about that later if you want.
Okay. So yeah, no problem. I think we're on a little bit of a disconnect there. I would say that it began to exist. You would say, well, the universe was maybe, minuscule, and it began to expand. Hey, I have one more thing for
Sure.
you, and then I'll let you get on to the next person. So you had mentioned that like the problem of evil, and I just want to touch on that real quick. You said it was one of the best arguments against Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
My thought would be it's probably one of the best arguments against atheism, because, for
Okay.
example, if I see you're smiling there. It's an interesting concept, but if we both agree that evil exists, in what way did we, have morality? So, like, what is your basis of a morality as an atheist if you don't believe that God created moral law? So, for example, like if I was in your shoes as an atheist, I would say, well, if I would go around and kill someone,
I would really
I
hope that
really-
you wouldn't, even if you were an atheist.
sure. Yes, I would agree. But how can I argue? What is your argument as an atheist against that, other than
I would say
saying,
that I
okay,
think it's
well,
bad.
but why?
Because
On
I have
what basis do you
I have
think
a
it's
certain
bad?
set of standards and values that I care about and that I use to discern good from bad.
Sure, and those developed over time.
Yep.
But what makes that really good or evil? So,
That's
for
what good.
example,
That's
we
what
have-
it means. Whether it
Yeah,
comports
but
with my standards, that's what good or evil means.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that something is good or evil.
I don't.
Like,
What do you
is
mean
it
by is? When I say something is good
So
or
that
something
is-
is bad, what that means is that it
Mhm.
comports with my standards or it doesn't. That's what those words mean, in my view.
Right. So what I'm saying, though, is from your perspective, you're saying that your morals are subjective, whereas I'm saying I'm coming from an objective source of morality.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to put the two together. Like, from your subjective stance, you can't really say anything's wrong.
That's
It's just
how does
your
that
opinion.
follow?
For example,
Saying
you
that
have-
saying that it's just my opinion says nothing to do about whether or not I can say something is right or wrong.
you can say it.
A
but
moral
it
subjectivist
doesn't actually
says that morals are opinions. That's what so you're just reasserting my position for me. Yeah, I agree. It is a personal stance.
You can't really tell me definitively that anything I do or say is absolutely wrong. It's just your
Sure, I
opinion,
can.
and
If it absolutely disagrees with my standards, then it's absolutely wrong.
So it's more so like a utilitarian argument. Where
No, not utilitarian at all.
So if you were on like the 40% side, let's say, for example, you know, in the 1800s, in slavery, I obviously believe that's wrong. But that is something where, you know, it was 60% believed that it was okay at the time, 40% didn't. They actually fought to abolish slavery. So they were wrong from that stance of morality.
From what stance of morality were people wrong? Who was wrong from what stance?
The people who thought slavery was okay.
I agree that slavery is wrong, and that the people who thought it was okay were wrong. Right. I agree with you on that.
Is it your opinion that goes? Is it your opinion that's the objective source?
No, it's not objective. It's subjective.
Right. But when
I don't think there is an objective source.
Right. So you can't necessarily claim that something is right or wrong. Absolutely.
Yes, I can. It's just right or wrong subjectively.
To you.
That's what right or wrong means.
Right. What I'm saying, though, is if you're believing that and somebody else believes the opposite thing, then who is correct? There is no truth.
I am the evaluator. When I make statements about morality, I am the evaluator. So I don't care what somebody else believes when I'm evaluating the morality of a situation.
Okay, so let me put it into perspective here. You believe that lying is okay in some circumstances.
Sure, I imagine you do too, right?
I would say lying is inherently wrong.
So you would wait. Hold on.
Correct?
Hold on. And I promise I will answer that. But you're not saying that it's always bad to lie, right?
I am saying that lying is wrong. Yes, it is always bad to lie.
If you were a Dutch person hiding Anne Frank in your basement and the Nazis came by and asked you, "Are you hiding a Jew?" you would think, "Oh, I better not lie because that's bad."
I don't have to lie about that.
If they say you answer yes or no or we're putting a gun to your head, like what do you do?
Gun to my head.
So you would rather die than lie to the SS? Okay, if that's your position. Anyway,
yeah,
what was your question?
My question is, in what sense am I right versus you're right? So you're saying lying is okay in some circumstances. I'm saying it's inherently wrong.
Yeah, so I would say that I'm a particularist of some kind, meaning that I don't have like a rule for every situation. And so you would tell me about the situation, you would say it's wrong, and I would evaluate the situation, see if lying lines up with my stances or my values, and I would evaluate whether it's correct or not, and I don't care what your position is.
But you have to understand that truth is one way or the other. You can't.
I don't think that there's an objective truth about morality.
Then that's what I'm asking.
I don't think that there is one. I don't like it. I think that is a nonsensical question.
So you can't tell me that anything is wrong.
Sure, I can. I can. Well, in the same way that I can't tell you that.
Subjectively.
So to be clear, in the same way that I can't tell you that anything is hot objectively. Like, yeah, that's because hot is subjective.
You're saying, okay. Hot and cold being objective and...
No, they're not objective. They are subjective. Hot and cold are subjective, right?
That has nothing to do with morality.
Yes, my claim is that that's exactly how morality is.
And I would disagree with that.
Okay, now why should I believe that there's an objective morality?
Because why do you know that anything is right or wrong in the first place?
Because I have certain stances, and those stances probably come from a mix of genetics and environment.
just missed what you said. I was getting a call.
Sorry?
I just was getting a call, so I missed what you said. You said
Yeah,
there are certain stances.
Yeah. Sorry, one sec. My computer's freaking out. I need to close out of something. Stat. Can you hear me still?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just closing out of Chrome and hopefully my computer will stop freaking out. Might take a second though. Much better. Okay. Yeah, so I don't think that there is any sense of objective morality, and I don't know why I should believe you when you say that there is.
Well, because I think things are inherently right or they're inherently wrong. And
you can have that stance, but how does that
right.
make it objective?
I'm saying if there is no objective morality, you cannot claim that anything is right or wrong.
I cannot claim that there's no objective right or wrong.
Right or wrong. Subjective right or wrong. Yes, which makes nothing absolutely right or wrong. It is subjective.
That's what subjective means.
So murder is not right or wrong.
No, it's just not objectively. It's just not objectively wrong.
Okay, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. In the same way that 80 degrees is not objectively hot.
But you're saying that evil in this world is what turns you away from being a Christian. And I'm saying you can't even say that there's evil in the world objectively. It's all subjective.
Yeah, because I'm a moral anti-realist, so I don't think that there is objective moral statements at all. But that doesn't mean that there's not evil. That evil is just subjective to my values.
Yeah, and I think that's where we both disagree. Is I would say that it is objective according to God's law. You would say it's subjective. So we can't really, meet on that there, because if everything's subjective, there is no objective moral right or wrong.
Yes, that is a restatement of the subjectivist position. Yeah, right. I agree.
So, and that's what I'm saying is
so just to be clear, the argument that you're making
is
like
true.
the way that it sounds like the thing that, sorry, let me get my words. The kind of thing that it sounds like you're saying is, it sounds like you're saying, pretend I'm you. Are you trying to say that pizza is not objectively delicious? And then I'm saying, yeah, it's subjectively delicious. And then you say, but then that means it's not objectively delicious. And then I say, I agree. That's my stance.
This is a moral argument, not necessarily a preference argument. You don't have preferences on morals.
Sure you do. That's what I think that morals essentially are.
And that's where we would disagree. And I don't.
Right, but your only refutation
is you're coming from a fact that God does not exist, and I'm coming from an assertion that God does exist. So we're going to have different conclusions. The only thing I'm saying is you can't use that argument of evil
sure I can,
as an argument
because
against Christianity, because
sure
you can't even say that it exists.
So it's an internal
Absolutely.
critique. So I assume your worldview and then find a contradiction within it. So I can absolutely make a problem of evil argument because it's an internal critique. It doesn't involve my position at all.
I don't think evil is a basis against Christianity. I think it's something that shows that, okay, well, we do have moral laws. We do have objective morality, and that's why we can say that there's evil in this universe, is because we know objectively that it's there. So it doesn't necessarily give you an argument against.
So the problem of evil is not about any evil, it's about gratuitous evil. Gratuitous meaning not evil that does not imply the existence of a greater good. Right.
Understood. Yep.
So the gratuitous evil, that's the problem for Christianity. And even Christian scholars will say, yeah, this is if anything's going to make you question your belief, it's that.
I would agree, but I also think it is the hardest argument against atheism as well.
But you didn't present an argument. You just kind of restated my position and then acted incredulous.
I think you missed the point that I was trying to make. But no, I appreciate this. I actually have to get going. I've got a meeting here in a couple minutes, but I
All right,
appreciate your
fair
time,
enough.
and
Thanks for being here, bud.
we'll be back and hopefully have
Sounds
some
good.
arguments for you.
All right, take care.
Thanks. You too.
We have some super chats to go through. Well, we have 2 super chats to go through. But hey, 2 is more than 0. From Eric Mishima, $5. Don't worry that the call felt unproductive. You may have reached some folks who are watching and lurking. That's true. And then $10 from Grimlock. Thank you so much, as always, Grimlock. W Grimlock in the chat. Huge W for Grimlock. All right, let's bring up another guest. There's somebody else who is claiming that like he'll have me converted to a theist in minutes or something. I hope he's still in the. I think his name was Ibn Aisha. Hope he's still in the chat. Oh, he's not. He's not in the Discord anymore. Okay, that's fine. All right, let's bring up a guest from YouTube. Oh wait, hold on. Something's not right. Okay, there are no guests from YouTube. All right, let's bring up another guest from TikTok then. Let's talk to John Janika Kovacs. Janika Kovacs. John, how's it going?
Hello, Professor.
John, you are quite distant from your microphone. Are you currently in a cave?
Wait 1 second, please.
Much better.
Turning on my headset.
Okay.
Now better?
Yeah.
So I am here now better?
Yeah.
You hear me?
I can hear you. What god do you believe in?
The question, it is the cyber civilization.
The what?
Robotics and technology. I know you like the physics.
Yeah. What does this have to do with God?
The question, the God agrees that here on the earth, on the world.
I'm not following.
That
Sorry, but I'm gonna have to disconnect you. I think there's too big of a language barrier. Also, the memes with the technologia or the technologia is so funny, but I didn't want to be mean. Like, I love those memes, and I send them to my wife every single time they show up in my chat in my FYP. By the way.
How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Awesome. What god do you believe in?
Abrahamic.
Are you Jewish, Muslim, or Christian?
Christian.
Okay, you can just say that next time. Okay, what's your best argument for Christianity?
You and I. I think
so
you and I.
Typically, arguments come in the form of a claim and then a justification.
Well, sure. I think the existence of you and I and our difference in perspective. I think that the reality that there's disagreement lends to the description of disagreement in the Bible. I think that.
Oh, that's way more common in Judaism. You should be Jewish if that's your position.
What do you mean?
Well, what I mean is that the tradition of arguing about interpretations and arguing about whether God exists at all and arguing about the tiniest of things, that's a Jewish thing. There's a reason why Jewish people make such fantastic lawyers. Like, that's a Jewish thing. You should be a Jewish person if that's your position.
Well, do you believe that that is not true?
Do I believe that what's not true?
Well, that's a great question. I didn't get to finish making my point. So what I'm pointing to is that the evidence to me that God is real, the God of the Bible is real, is that it is explicitly described, human nature is explicitly described in the scriptures, whether it be downfalls, whether it be vices, whether it be the nature of man to be good versus evil, all of those things, on and on and on. We can pick one of them and talk about it if you want, but the existence of those things as they are described in the Bible, to me, is evidence that the God of the Bible is real, because there's no defining line where those things become irrelevant. There's no defining point in history where the teachings of the Bible, the scriptures of the Bible, become irrelevant to the point where people today cannot relate to them.
Well, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that the Bible accurately captures the human experience. And maybe that's even true. I'm not so sure all of it's relevant today, but maybe that's true. But that is exactly what you would predict if these were humans writing about the human experience.
Sure,
so
absolutely.
This doesn't imply any divine inspiration at all.
Well, I mean, it's described in the Bible that divine inspiration will not come from our own understanding, and that's clearly laid out in the Bible.
Okay, but my point is that just because the Bible may accurately capture the human experience, it doesn't mean that God's real. That's a non sequitur.
Okay, sure. Does your opinion of the Bible, does it prevent you from acknowledging the possibility that your understanding of it is wrong?
I could be wrong about anything. I could be wrong that the sky is blue. I don't think I am, but I could be.
Me too.
Well, while he's gone, Garba Gaiman with the 5 Canadian. Thanks for the blueberries are objectively better than grapes. It's absolutely true. Blueberries are better than grapes. Welcome back.
Sorry, I got a phone call. I don't know why people call me that. I don't use my phone for that.
Who wants to be called? Nobody wants a phone call. Anyway.
I don't know. We used to pay for ringtones. It's weird.
I know. What a weird world we lived in.
There's so much. There's so many people that I love listening to you talk to people, because you intellectually undress people in the classiest way. It's really
so
really
to be clear.
to watch.
So to be clear, you're like, that seems like fun.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
That's funny. But what I wanted to say is that when people try to justify the existence of a God with the universe and the existence of matter and the existence of time, space, and they try to have these conversations based in the understanding of man and science as we understand it and what we know, they're leaving out the reality that the Bible teaches, that the Bible teaches specifically that leaning on those things will lead to nothing.
Leaning on science? Leaning on empirical stuff?
Leaning on things that we have an understanding of. Leaning on, yes, science, empirical things. Science changes, does it not?
Sure. That's actually one of the nice things about science. Isn't that a good thing?
Well, I'm not arguing against it. My point that I want to point to specifically at that juncture in the conversation is that, the things that we believed to be 100% true 100 years ago, we've proven not to be true today, right? Things have changed. Our ability to observe, right? But our ability to observe has changed.
That's a good thing.
I agree with you.
But on the other hand, as I said to the other guest, that's the downfall of the Bible. If the Bible gets something wrong, if the Bible got something wrong 2,000 years ago, it will be wrong forever.
Okay, sure. I think that's a perfectly fair point. Can you say definitively that the Bible is wrong?
There are definitely things in it that are false, yeah.
Okay, so I would like, if you don't mind, share an example with me of something that you know definitively to be wrong.
Yeah, that rabbits don't chew, or that rabbits chew cud.
What?
One sec.
Yeah, I'm going to need you to help me with this one. I don't even know what you're talking about.
So Leviticus 11:16.
You said 16? 11, 16?
11, 16, yeah. Let me know when you have it.
The horned owl, the screech owl, the gull, any kind of hawk.
11, 16?
Yep. Leviticus 11, 16.
Oh, sorry. Did I say 16? It's 6. 11, 6.
Okay, correct. The rabbit, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is unclean for you.
Right. So does a rabbit chew cud?
I have no idea.
It does
What
not.
is cud?
Cud is when I think it's called an ungulate. No, it's not an ungulate. When a certain kinds of animals, if they have more than one stomach, they will eat their food, like hay or whatever. Then they'll throw it back up. Then they'll eat it again. Ruminant, that's what they're called. And then they'll do this, one or more times. And when they say chew cud, what they're doing is they're chewing the food that they threw up.
Okay.
So cud is that stuff that they threw up that they then eat again. But rabbits don't do that. I don't know why they thought rabbits did that, but they don't.
Yeah, that's. I think that I'm going to direct back to my previous statement. Do we not observe how science and our observation of things change? I'm with you.
This isn't like a scientific statement. This isn't like, oh, we could be like, you can just go watch a rabbit. They just don't do that, right?
Right. No, I understand that. I suppose my mind immediately goes back to that is an observable change in understanding, right? So somebody wrote this down in Leviticus. Mm-hmm. They wrote it down, and observably today, we can see that doesn't happen.
Yep.
So that would lead me to my next question. You agree that man wrote the Bible, right?
Yeah, I think it was entirely written. Well, yeah, probably by men only. Probably not women, but maybe.
So the only differentiating claim between the Bible and any other book is that it's inspired by God to be written. Correct?
Well, yeah. So in particular, Leviticus 11 starts with, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, say to the Israelites, and then it's just a whole bunch of stuff. So this is supposed to be God talking.
Yeah, I'm with you. But again, I suppose my question is, given that man wrote the Bible, we're reading the English translation from the original text, from Hebrew, from the Greek. So in those translations, what is it that you do for a living?
I'm a scientist.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you're very good at what you do, and you pride yourself in being very articulate and very disciplined in reading, discerning, and comprehending what it is that you're reviewing, right?
I would hope so.
Well, me too. So my question to you is do you acknowledge in reading the Bible that you have a several thousand year translation and conveyance from I guess the best way, or the simplest way to put it, would be to create a buffer in your mind for the text and the context of every word in the Bible? Do you think that's fair to make that statement and translating that into our understanding today?
We could, but we know what the original Hebrew is, so we can just go look at the original Hebrew.
Right. No, I understand that. But I'm asking you, do you acknowledge that exists? So if somebody has never read the Bible before, and they pick up the Bible and they read this verse, this Leviticus verse, right? And they say, wait a minute, that's not true. And they throw the whole Bible out because it's like, well, the Bible lied to me about rabbits eating cud.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, it did.
Well, that's what I'm saying. My point to you is somebody could say the same thing about a textbook from 100 years ago.
Yeah, and then we can. So here's the lovely thing about the textbook. So the textbooks can update, right? That's the whole point. So the point is that somebody says something about a textbook 100 years ago. Yeah, they got this wrong. We'll be like, yeah, they did. Here's our best understanding now. But if I point out something wrong in the Bible, you can't update the Bible. It's wrong forever.
I hear what you're saying, So I'm okay. So in your takeaway from this verse in Leviticus, what do you think the intended purpose is here? To deceive people, to
No,
manipulate people?
they were just obviously wrong. I mean, rabbits go like this a lot, and so they probably thought that it was chewing cud. They were just wrong.
Okay. So
Like, they just do that, right?
Is that well? Let me ask you this: Do you think that using that verse as an example for obvious example out of the Bible that is untrue, do you think that gives credence to the idea that the Bible does not have validity?
I think it gives credence to the idea that the Bible is not infallible, and if the Bible is not infallible, now we have to start questioning what else is it wrong about.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that Jesus' teachings in the Bible specifically point to the behavior of questioning what it is that religion teaches. That there are things that are religious teachings in the Bible that people are not held to that standard. I mean, that's a reality of the Bible. I mean, what do you say to Old Testament practices prior to the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ for the purpose of sanctification? I mean, what do you say to all of those? They became irrelevant when Christ died and was resurrected.
That's apparently, I think that was like a Peter thing, because if you look at like the early texts, especially like the more Jewish-centric texts, like they were pretty clear that like no, you still have to follow all of these laws. It was only when the gospel started to be spread to the Gentiles that they kind of said, nah, you don't have to follow them really. You don't have to do all this Jewish stuff.
But I'm talking about the teachings of Christ, like
he says he doesn't come to abolish the laws but to fulfill them, right?
He does say that, but
so he explicitly says, yeah, no, you still have to follow these laws. I'm not abolishing them.
That is not what he said. That's not what he said. I mean,
he came not to abolish, right?
Do you think that the thief on the cross next to Jesus was held to that standard?
I don't know what standard the thief on the cross was held to. I don't he was a thief, so he probably got put on the cross for stealing.
Well, my point
Paul,
is
not Peter. I'm sorry. Paul was the one who de-Jewified it.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other conversation.
I always get those two confused. Peter, Paul.
Paul is the gangster that used to unalive Christ followers, and Peter was beloved by Christ. So my
well, that I know. No, it's just the names. I always get the names confused.
So do you believe the arguments that people make that the teachings of Paul in the later writings after Christ's death, do you believe that they contradict the teachings of Christ?
Some people seem to believe that. I'm pretty agnostic on the issue. I wasn't there. We don't really have like the original teachings anyway. Like we don't know what, like there are some things that we can probably correctly attribute to Jesus just because it's common across a lot of different texts, but like most of it is just not, and so it's hard to say like what's actually was an original teaching, what wasn't.
I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old either, so I don't know either. But I would make the argument that a lot of people they like to practice what I call bumper sticker Christianity, where they take things out of context, out of the Bible, and they apply them to their lives the way that they want, and they don't really acknowledge the context in which it's written. Like Jeremiah 29:11 is like, fear not, for I make plans to prosper you, not to destroy you. And the entire context of that was a promise given to a people group that was in subjugation. And that was God's promise to deliver them. But people use that verse as though it's God's going to take care of me. It's people taking the text of the Bible completely out of context.
Yep.
So
I agree.
So, I mean, it's like what What type of science do you practice?
I'm a physicist / mathematician, depending on who you ask.
Okay, so I'm a physicist idiot. Okay, so I don't understand much of anything about physics.
Okay.
But I assume that you have a strict regiment of process to evaluate claims, to evaluate information, evaluate data, right? You don't just willy-nilly decide,
Yeah.
hey, this is true, this is not true, right? So you have a process of validating those things. So I would ask you, what is your opinion on the number of people and the claims and the existence of the Bible itself, the belief that Christ was the Son of God and that he died on the cross and was resurrected? What is your opinion as to how that has successfully survived thousands of years worth of time passing, the translation being happening, whatever happens to the translation over that period of time, whatever the questioning elements are, at the end of the day, the claim of Christ being the Son of God, dying on the cross for the atonement of sins, and being resurrected to represent the defeat of death for all of eternity. How do you justify, or how do you explain, or do you have an opinion as to how that happened that doesn't seem really crazy?
Yeah, it happened because, well, so I think probably what happened is the mythologization of a real man. May have been like an end times preacher or something like that. And then over time, by, essentially just by, essentially a game of telephone over the next few decades, he became mythologized. And it turns out that, A, it's a nice message that, all you have to do is believe in this guy and you get to have eternal paradise forever. And B, nobody had ever evangelized before. So it kind of got the first mover's advantage in the whole evangelism thing, because nobody knew that this was a thing that you could do. So it got a lot of followers because there was no competition, right? There's no competition to evangelism, to Christian evangelism. So yeah, I mean, like, it's not going to be so surprising that it was going to be pretty successful.
Okay, I mean, I think that's a reasonable explanation. I would like to challenge you though on explaining how that evolved. I mean, when you look at the scriptures and you look at the timeline in which the Bible is written, and you look at the different elements that lead from beginning until Christ was crucified and resurrected, and then the following of the disciples and the writings of the disciples, when you follow from beginning to end, not in the order in which it's in the Bible, but in the chronological order, those things lend to one another. So in a time when the ability to communicate via writing was so limited, I guess my curiosity goes to, how do you look at that? And I'm assuming that you've looked into this. I'm assuming you're aware of that. Like, you have to acknowledge that's pretty remarkable. At least it is to me.
So what I think is that there's probably a grain of truth to some of it, or perhaps one story that spread and then it got interpreted by other people. It could have just as well been that there was an imposter after after Jesus was crucified, and then he showed up for a few days. He didn't go to Jesus's mom because Jesus's mom would have recognized the imposter, but and then he maybe he swindled a few people and then he dipped like that. Like, it could have been that, and then a few people believed him and they spread this message that he has risen, and it goes from there. Like, it's pretty easy for that kind of thing to happen, especially because imposters were apparently a really common thing back then.
Man, I tell you what, if you're right, that is going to be the swindle of the ages.
Well, I don't think that the imposter would have known ahead of time that his actions would have those consequences.
Well, whether or not the swindler actually gets credit, it doesn't change the fact that would be the swindle of the ages. I understand we can make these arguments, and
To be fair, I think that probably Muhammad was probably more prolific of a swindler, because I kind of think he probably did it intentionally.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we learned anything from people who try to get people to drink Kool-Aid, it's that they have selfish motives at some point.
Usually, yeah.
It's kind of obvious. I suppose it's so easy to get lost in the weeds, right? But the reality is of the teachings of Christ is that when you compare, for instance, the Western civilization version of the church, whether it be whatever denomination of the church you want to talk about, the reality is that there are fewer than a handful of actual representatives of the teaching of Christ in the midst of the existence of the quote unquote church. I make the argument often that the Western church is one of the greatest discreditors of the teachings of Christ, because I call it the taco coffee bar and fog machine version of Christianity is not what Jesus taught. When you hear that phrase, what would Jesus do? Like flipping tables and whipping people wasn't out of the question.
Also caring for the needy and the poor, the sick, and the yelling at rich people, that whole thing.
Yeah, we can't afford to do that because we have to buy new lights and new sound equipment for the church. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Well, at least we can agree on that.
Yeah, we can't feed you. We're doing a building fund right now, okay? Sorry, we can't help you with your electric bill.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you on that.
So, I mean, I understand that the arguments could be made, and I get that. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who says what. It doesn't matter what proof or evidence does or does not exist. The teachings of the Bible are very clear. There is no amount of evidence that can be granted to somebody to believe in something that isn't seen without faith. There's a reason that the teachings of Christ call for the existence of childlike faith. I mean,
that just sounds like saying, "Oh, don't question it too hard, just believe." Like that sounds like the kind of thing that you tell somebody when you want them to believe you, but you don't. But it's not true.
Well, sure, I can understand that argument. Do you by any chance have any children?
I don't.
You got like nieces or nephews?
No, I'm only 31, and I only have an older brother.
So, but you've been around little kids, like
yes, Yes,
like,
I have young cousins.
Okay, so when you spend time with them, you observe their behavior, the things that they believe or don't believe. You can help them, correct them. It's easy for them to be led astray, right?
Yep.
They're impressionable.
Yep.
So the thing about childlike faith, and I understand what you're saying, the argument of, don't. I always make this comment in reference to politics and the government. If you don't think about it, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? However, the element of the childlike faith that I want to point to is that the existence of our knowledge base, the existence of our prejudices, the existence of our bigotry, it prevents us from acknowledging possibility. Would you agree with that?
I don't see how bigotry in our knowledge base prevents us from. There are plenty of bigoted people who also believe in God, right?
Well, yes. So let me be more pointed, because I kind of created a blanket to make a simple example. I shouldn't have done that. If a person has a prejudicial idea about someone else that is not based in anything other than something they've created in their own mind, it can prevent them from engaging with that person, right? It can prevent them from experiencing something with that person.
Sure.
To be more pointed, that is what I'm speaking of. That is the purpose of the childlike faith, is to believe and I want to acknowledge your argument of it's asking not to think about it, because you are obviously a critical thinker. You obviously have the ability to
Your
intelligence.
flattery will take you nowhere, sir.
It's not flattery. It's a fact.
I'm just giving you a hard time, bud.
It's a fact. A person who thinks critically and asks questions of things, it's a sign of intelligence. There are people who don't ask questions. They don't consider things. It's a sign of low intelligence, right? So the reason that the childlike faith is so instrumental is because it is a required check, a reflection. Because if you're a grown man that's lived 40 years and you've got 40 years of life experience, and you've never gone to church, you don't know anything about the Bible, you don't know anything about Christ, you don't know anything about anything that has to do with the Bible. There are people all of the time who come to the understanding that Christ is the Son of God and he was resurrected. And you ask yourself, how did they come to that conclusion? Right? I mean, that's a reasonable question.
Because they turned off their brain, right?
Well, that is an argument.
They had childlike faith instead. They turned off their brain and had childlike faith.
That is an argument that could be made, and I understand that argument. But I ask you, can you explain it?
Yeah.
I mean,
easily. Yeah, it happens all the time. And the explanation is that they have something that they can't explain happen to them. So rather than thinking critically about, could it be something that I don't know the answer to? Could I go try to figure out what happened? They just say, well, I can't explain it. I've heard about this God guy. He does stuff like this sometimes. Must be that. That's what it usually is.
Okay. But what do you say to those people? I mean,
I just tell them, look, if this is the thing that convinced you, then nothing will unconvince you. But but somebody else's personal experience will never convince me.
And that's fair. But that is, I think that it is important for any person who's considering Christ being the Son of God, being crucified and being resurrected. I think it is very important for any person who considers that to consider the significance of the call to have childlike faith, because Jesus was very clear when he taught about the childlike faith. He told the disciples, many will come to me and I will say, depart from me, you doers of iniquity. I never knew you. I mean, he made it very clear. And they said, did we not cast out demons? Did we not heal the sick? Did we not do all of these things?
This is...
I think it's Matthew.
Is this Matthew 18:2?
Probably.
Okay. I'm blanking on a word. I think that it actually does the childlike faith, does that only show up in Matthew?
Let me look.
Because that's all I'm finding. But maybe there's a place where it shows up elsewhere.
I think Jesus was the only one who spoke about it, and the disciples' writings. I don't remember it being a point of.
Oh, I guess it's in. I guess there's something. Hold on, I'm seeing Mark 10:14.
Yeah, those are.
Oh well, no. Okay. No, that's not a good example. And then Luke 18:17.
Are you on redeeminggod.com?
Yes. Yeah. So the only reason I say this is because that's the kind of thing that I would expect. I'm not even sure if Jesus actually would have said. And if if that specific kind of statement is only in one gospel, then it's totally believable that it was made up. And then now we can start asking why would somebody make this up? Well, Mark famously, sorry, not Mark, Matthew famously was significantly had higher Christology or whatever than the earlier Gospels, And so, maybe he was trying to say, oh, well, this is a little unbelievable, but you gotta have childlike faith so you can believe it.
I mean, it's really unbelievable. I mean, from beginning to end, like Genesis, Exodus.
All things like, to be super clear, like Mark is way more believable than Matthew, right? There's like hardly anything. Like, I mean, there are a few miracles here and there in Mark, but like Mark is like way more believable than Matthew or John are.
Well, from Matthew's, well, I won't go there. I hear your point. I hear your point. I acknowledge your point, and you are correct. There's absolutely no logical way to provide a justification for the craziness of the claims and the reality of what it takes to believe them. There is none.
So then why believe them? Like you have to understand that faith is like a really, really bad way to come to correct conclusions. Because you could have faith that, like, I don't know, that you're gonna win the lottery tomorrow, and that doesn't, like, you almost certainly will not, but you could have faith and then come to that conclusion and you'd be wrong.
Well, sure, but Blitz, I mean, you have to acknowledge that you have faith in things. I mean, that's part of the human experience.
I do. Like, what do I have faith in?
Well, do you not have faith in the science as you understand it now?
No, it's not faith. It's the whole business of science is it's empirical. You test it.
Well, I understand that, but remember our conversation earlier. There was science in the medical field 30 years ago that's been proven wrong today, 100 years ago. I mean, the reality is that science changes, but we have faith in those outcomes, right? It's like it's not
faith. So it's based on evidence. Now, it might be the case that our understanding is wrong, but it's still based on evidence, which means it's not faith.
Okay, well, if you believe something is correct, and you believe it to be true, and it turns out to be wrong, is it not simply agreeable to say, I had faith that it was true?
No. You could have had evidence that it was true, and it still turned out wrong.
Okay. Well, I could make the same, to wade off into the weeds, I could make the same argument for believing that Christ was the Son of God.
Well, now you're saying that it's not faith that you have evidence. So which one is it? Well,
the evidence. I'll propose it to you this way. I understand that in your mind, you have a worldview where you are focused on empirical data, you are focused on knowing things definitively, you are focused on...
No, not knowing things definitively. That's not part of my worldview.
Well, I mean, when we're talking about proving a claim, are we not talking about having a definitive answer?
No, we're talking about having evidence for something. I rarely use the language of proof.
Okay, fair enough. So, all right. Well, with that, again, back to what I was trying to say is that you have an understanding that guides and dictates how and what you believe, right?
Yeah, I have a way of coming to conclusions, sure.
Okay, and we all do. Yep. So, like I said earlier, I'm not a physicist. I could probably talk to you for hours about physics, and I'm not going to teach you anything. I mean, that's just the reality, right?
Maybe.
You study physics, and I don't.
Right.
So, that doesn't mean that the merits of your understanding are worth any less because I don't share them, right?
Yeah, so, no, but I'm so confused. Like, what does this have to do with the claim? Like, is it faith or is it not faith? Well,
faith is the foundation for if you don't have faith. Jesus describes it as you have nothing.
That sounds like somebody who's trying to sell you. That sounds like the kind of thing that somebody who's trying to sell you a lie would say.
Okay, sure. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that specifically. If Jesus is trying to sell a lie,
well, to be clear, I don't think it was Jesus. Well, maybe it was Jesus, but I suspect that it was the gospel writers or the apostles that may have been trying to sell something that maybe was a little bit inflated.
Okay. So let's explore that. To what end?
To maintain their image, to maintain their reinforce their own beliefs.
Would you argue that the apostles, that in an effort to support their own pride and their own egos for their own ideas, they went to the extent of standing up to the local authorities, to testifying to things that ultimately caused them to lose their lives?
I don't grant that that's true or that happened.
Okay. Well,
we just don't have evidence that says that it did, right? We have church tradition, basically.
Well, are you going to say that about John?
About John?
Yeah.
What's the evidence that John was murdered?
John was beheaded.
What's the evidence of that?
Well, I'm asking you. Are you going to say that?
If there's
John?
evidence for it, I'd love to see it. I mean, where's the evidence? Like, is that church tradition, or is that just, or is that recorded somewhere that's in some sort of ideally historical way?
Okay. So when you say evidence, are the historical writings, are they not credible in your mind?
The biblical texts, not so much, because those are the places where they're trying to say, yes, this is how we know they're true because XYZ thing happened. So they're obviously biased. But if there's other historical writings at the time, then that's fine. Like if you have a writing of Tacitus or what's his face, Josephus or whatever that says these things, then that would be more convincing.
Okay. Sure. So, I mean, the reality of this conversation is you and we're facing opposite directions, and I am looking at it from a standpoint of what it lends to in my understanding, and you seem to be looking at it critically in a way where you have to critique and ask questions, right? If you don't believe in it, it's reasonably fair to ask questions. But if you go to the effort of making alternative arguments without researching the existence of evidence to the fact, there's no. So I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
The reason why I said what I said is because I have looked into this, and my understanding is that we have evidence that we maybe have evidence that two of the apostles were actually executed, and I believe it was Paul and James. As far as I know, we don't actually have evidence that any of the other apostles were executed. The only reason why people believe that is because of church tradition. But I'm happy to be wrong about that. If you actually have evidence that John was actually beheaded or was murdered or whatever, then I'd love to see it. But I just haven't found that in my searching.
So I think that there's I would have to look. I think I want to say it's the Antiquities of the Jews.
Josephus?
Yes. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
And he referred to John being killed by Herod.
Did he?
Let me Google it real quick. Let me Google it. Book 18, chapter 5, section 2. Let me look at that real quick.
Book 18, chapter 5, section 2?
Yeah.
So we have to be a little bit careful, because I know that the Antiquities of the Jews is believed to have some forgeries in it. So there's one section that mentions Jesus that's legitimate, and then one section that might not be legitimate. So I just have to always verify. Let me pull this up really quick. Oh yeah. Okay, so we're talking about John the Baptist, not John, gospel writer John, right?
Yeah, John the Baptist. John.
Okay,
the
I was
gospel writer died on an island.
Okay, I thought you were talking about John, gospel writer.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
the other John,
sure. I would absolutely believe that John was executed. Yeah, sure. But he wasn't an apostle, right?
Well, he was.
He was kind of came before Jesus. It's kind of like a pre-Jesus thing.
He was with Jesus. Like, he was at the same time. It was a concurrent timeline. Like, he was being beheaded.
Well, I mean, he started before Jesus did, right?
Shortly before, yes. I believe it was like a couple years before. But like, I think if he was alive today, he would be like, he would have a custom fitted tinfoil hat. Like, everyone would just think he was a conspiracy theorist type of guy.
Yeah, maybe.
Probably grungy. Probably didn't take showers kind of guy.
Yeah, a little bit jank.
The whole eating locusts and sackcloth business probably put a little mark on him.
So you're familiar with this, with the like the Christian forgery of the Jewish antiquities, right? Like that there's one particular section that was very obviously forged.
I am not. Which one is it?
Yeah, let me find it if I can. Because this is a thing that's like pretty well, at least from what I've read, it seems, yeah, okay, hold on, I think I found it. It seems pretty well accepted. So it is, yeah, okay, here we go. Yeah, so fresh evidence to forge Jesus passage in Josephus. So there is a narrative anomaly. The study concludes that the uses of the Greek verb forms such as well, there's Greek words that I can't say, but which passage is it? Okay, I can't actually find which passage. I think it's the second part. But I can look into that. If it's worth your time, I can look into it now. If it's not, is it here? Is it chapter 25? Oh no, it's 1863. That's what it is. Yeah. Jewish Antiquities 1863 and 64. That's the one. That's widely believed to be fabrication. It's the one where Josephus says he was the Messiah, right?
It'd be a wild claim in that context, wouldn't it?
Yep.
So
it's not super relevant. Sorry.
No, you're good. I mean, I'm here to learn.
It's the Testimonium Flavanium. That's what it's. Sorry, it's book 18, chapter 3. Sentence 3 or whatever. But that's neither here nor there. So the point is that John the Baptist probably executed John the disciple. I don't know why anybody would believe that he was.
No, it's yeah. Whoever believes that was probably just straight up told a lie. He was exiled to an island, and that's where he was believed to have.
That's why I was sort of confused. So we can agree that John the Baptist executed. Sure. What does this say about anything?
Well, I mean, he was very from what little evidence outside of the Bible exists. It's obvious that he was very anti the modern church at the time. He was very anti the government. He was very well known for being that, and he was very outspoken about the significance of Jesus. So that, all of that ties in with the Bible. So, I mean, it's just like.
But I think that he was probably executed for being a menace, not because he professed Jesus as God and went to the sword because of it. Like he was a menace, right?
The Bible actually says he was unalived because at the request of Herod's daughter.
But again, the explanation for his execution is not something that we have a source for outside of the Bible.
Well, to your question, yes, he was a menace to her because he exposed her and her behaviors. And
so then, so then even according to the Bible, it has nothing to do with Jesus.
Well, I never said that he did. I just asked if you believe that he was beheaded.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
I never made that claim. I mean, it lays that story out in the Bible.
Okay. So, I mean, like that's plausible. Like, I'm not going to say like that definitely didn't happen because that's plausible. That's a totally reasonable thing that could have happened. I don't know if it's true. We don't have any extra biblical sources, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and I think where there is definitely an element of people who claim to be Christian. They blindly believe things that they're told, and they don't even read what the Bible actually says about it. They don't actually read what the original text actually says about it. They don't actually look into the context of verses when they apply them to their lives, as we covered earlier. I acknowledge that exists. I will be the first one to agree with you that that's ridiculous. My curiosity is, I to go a little further with that. I understand the question of how could there be a God that created this being everything, being earth, space, time, matter, everything, right? I understand that. So I suppose the way that my brain works, if there isn't something to substantiate that no, you're good. If there isn't anything to substantiate that in a person's mind to believe that God created those things, that's fine, right? I suppose my question for those people who believe that are, what is the alternative, and how do you come to give more credence to that?
You don't need an alternative, right? I mean,
I'm not saying that there has to be an alternative, but to make an argument. So it's like the God versus nothing argument. If somebody believes that everything came from nothing, okay. Well,
I don't actually know anybody who believes that, by the way.
There are those people.
I've never met them.
Okay, well, that's fair. Well, to be fair, your prompt and the conversations that you have wouldn't necessarily prompt a response from specifically those people.
Well, I do talk with atheists.
Well, I'm not talking about atheists. I'm just I'm talking
also,
about people.
Wait, don't you believe that the universe came from nothing? That God made it out of nothing?
Yeah, I believe in the Big Bang.
So you do believe it came from nothing?
Yeah, I believe it came from nothing. I just think that God was the creator of it.
Okay, but I don't believe it came from nothing.
And that's fair. So what do you believe it came from?
Well, I lean towards it having always existed.
Okay. And it's entirely possible that it did. It's entirely possible that the entire creation story in the book of Genesis was folklore from the beginning of humanity when they were able to write. I mean, it could be a completely made up story.
Could be.
To my understanding and to my logic, I have to ask the question, what makes more sense? And to me, intelligent design makes more sense. It just, to me, it just does.
Really?
It makes more.
Like you look around at the flaws of the human body and the flaws of the animal kingdom, and you're like, yeah, intelligently designed.
Well, articulate to me the flaws you're referring to.
So the giraffe famously has a nerve ending that starts in its brain goes all the way down its neck to its heart, wraps around the aorta, the biggest blood vessel, and then comes back up to its head to connect to the larynx. It's called the recurrent laryngeal nerve. And that doesn't make any sense. That if that's an example of design, the designer like failed in their engineering classes.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that one. That may be true. I'm not aware of that. And
there's some nice diagrams that I can pull up for you if you want.
Well, I'll just Google it real quick. I'm really curious now that you brought it up.
Okay. Just look up like recurrent laryngeal, and by the way, like basically all mammals will have this, but it's just extra hilarious on giraffes because they have very long necks.
What is the name of the nerve?
It's called the recurrent laryngeal nerve, but I got it. I got you. Let me just here's a good diagram. So it's a nerve that starts in your head, and in humans it goes down below the heart and then comes back up to the larynx, the voice box. But in giraffes, it starts in the head, goes all the way down to the heart, loops around the aorta, and then goes all the way back up to the larynx. And sauropods, even worse, it goes all the way down to their heart, all the way around their
Now, Mr. Blitz, when was the last time they did a biopsy of a dinosaur to find out?
You're right, you got me there. But we do know about giraffes. We do know about giraffes, though.
Giraffe. I don't know about the dinosaur. Hey, you know
all
what?
right, fair.
They may have found a dinosaur in the ice somewhere, and they may have done it. And
I'm actually going to Google this. Laryngeal nerve dinosaur. Fossil. Anyway, so it like that's not good design, right?
Well, I'm curious. So I'm not familiar with this nerve. So I'm Googling it right now, and I'm trying to figure out what is the purpose of this nerve. It says
the nerve controls the larynx, right? That's what it's there for. So the larynx is your voice box, and it controls the muscles in your voice box, with one exception, right? But the point is when we were fish, we weren't fish, but there were fish. They had this nerve. They had like a hyoid bone with muscles there, and there it didn't like the heart was below the head and between the heart was below the brain and the nerve. So it made sense for it to pass through or to pass behind the aorta. But as the neck got longer and as the head tilted up over the course of evolutionary process, that nerve stayed behind the aorta even if the larynx moved up with the head. And so you end up evolutionarily with this really weird design, which makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, but it makes no sense from a design perspective.
Well, to that point specifically, I would ask, or I would make the statement that depends on if there's a difference between believing in evolution and not believing in evolution. I believe in evolution. If a person doesn't believe in evolution, I think maybe they should read a science book. But
agreed.
The reality of the scope of evolution, I think there's some varying claims, right? Like there's varying degrees of evolution.
Are you about to do a macroevolution versus microevolution thing to me?
No, I'm definitely not.
Thank God. See what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did there. I'm definitely not going to do that. But the argument, an argument against evolution is, in my opinion, and I don't know anything. I'm just some guy on the internet. It's just made out of ignorance. It's just aren't we all? It's just made out of ignorance, in my opinion. So.
But then what? So then where do you see design? I mean, like if humans weren't designed because we evolved, then where's the design?
Well, I don't believe that we evolved from goop. I don't believe that we evolved from one cell. I believe that.
So then, which part of evolution do you reject?
I believe that there is a creation, and over time, elements changed, environments changed, and evolution.
So do you think that we evolved from a more primitive primate?
I think it's entirely possible. Yes.
Okay, do you think it's possible that we evolved from a more primitive mammal?
I think it's entirely possible. Yes.
What about if we evolved from fish?
You lose me there.
Why?
I haven't seen evidence to substantiate the claim that we have.
Have you seen
The-
Tiktaalik?
No.
This is gonna blow your mind.
What is it called?
It's called Tiktaalik. I'll pull it up. Don't worry about it. It's called Tiktaalik. And Tiktaalik is like one of the prototypical. It's like our fossil. It's like the fossil of a fish that grew legs. And we have like a really spectacular fossil of it where you can actually see it has like lobe-finned legs.
Yeah, I have that image pulled up. That just looks like a baby gator. I'm just kidding.
Except it was a fish, right?
Yeah.
So like clearly like fish be walking though.
Well, I mean, in Genesis, serpents talked. So you see what I did there?
That's true. You did do that. It took me a second, but yeah. Yeah, so all I'm saying is that I don't know how convinced the design argument is for me. Because like I don't know, I look at the world and like there are some really cool things, but there's also like a lot of really weird things. Things that are like that you would not expect under a designer, I think. Like who ordered the weak nuclear force? What is that good for?
Well, I there's a lot of things I don't understand about space. Why do we have to be traveling through it so fast?
That's a good question.
Like why do we have to be spinning so fast?
It's a great question. I mean, we are, but the question is why? Well, that's just how it happened to be. But if God designed it, why is it that way?
And why are there so many planets?
Yeah, great question.
Why are there so many? Why couldn't it just be us and the moon and the sun?
You know, let me. There's a good comic that you might appreciate. One sec. You'll appreciate this, I think. Was this SMBC? Nah, it's on Reddit. But Reddit is it's War and Peas. Okay. Here. You might appreciate this. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, I love that. We love that guy. What did you do when you visited?
What did you do to him?
I've seen that. It's so great.
Yeah, it's like maybe Jesus shows up on all the planets, and we're just the ones who killed him.
We love that guy. We give him our best every year when he visits. What do you guys do when he visits?
Who knows? Maybe that's why there's so many planets. Maybe we were the last one. But look, it's been lovely, but I should let you go because there's a lot of people in the guest box. I think at least there were at some point. So thanks for being here. My lies are better than yours. Have a good one. Okay.
You too. Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right. Let's bring up another guest from the queue. And by the way, remember to we have some super chats to get through. Sway for Everything with the $10, so generous. Thank you. Jack the Ripper used grapes to seduce prostitutes at an average of 1.86 per pound versus blueberries at 4.48 or $4.48. Grapes are for peasants. True, grapes are for peasants. That's absolutely right. Blueberries are the fruit of kings. And from Res Instance, I think that those are Australian dollars. The creation makes more sense argument is so common because it definitely does satisfy this need for people this need people have to know how their reality came to be. However, reality doesn't owe us an easy explanation. That's true. Reality is complicated. It just is. Sorry, y'all. And that's okay. Do I have a Reddit account? Of course I have a Reddit account. What do you take me for? A normie?
Hi.
Boa.
Can you hear me?
Boa Zig. How's it going? I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm alright.
Good. What God do you believe in?
The Muslim one. Or,
Okay.
well, used to, but I'm still going to try and argue it because
No.
I want to be less I'm agnostic, but I want to be an atheist.
No. Read the prompt. Where do pears? Pears are like a shit fruit, okay? Pears are a shit fruit. They really are. They're like
Hello.
grainy. What's up? How's it going?
Before I even start, blueberries are not better than grapes.
Do you want me to kick you? No, I'm kidding.
I'm kidding. Well, sorry, but I'm actually a Christian, you could say.
Okay. What's the best argument for the existence of the Christian God?
I come from the basis of the universe and its creation.
Okay, how do you figure?
Well, the universe, being how it is, has a very obvious and clear beginning.
Really? Why is that obvious?
Well, time.
What about time?
If the universe is eternal and time is how we see it linear, then there is no beginning and there is no end to the universe. And so therefore, if you put it in perspective, the present is like the number one.
By the way, you're cutting it. You're cutting in and out.
The past. Oh.
I think you're better now.
Okay. So, the past. Hold on, actually. My internet should be better.
Okay. You were saying? The past?
Okay, so the present would be like the number one, and the past would be like, you can say negative infinity, and the future positive infinity. If we were to look at it from an eternal point of view.
Yep.
And time moves that number one to number two, and then to number three, in that order. So if the universe is eternal, then there is a negative infinity that it started at. Which actually doesn't make any sense considering
it didn't
eternal.
start. That's the point, right?
Well, that's the point. So if it didn't start and time is linear, there is no present.
Why not? You can have an infinite past, like you said. We're at one. There's negative. There's negative a trillion, negative a trillion for any number. There's a negative of that, and there's
but
all those numbers for the positive ones.
Infinity.
No, it didn't start.
Exactly.
It didn't start at negative infinity. It just didn't start.
So, the universe being eternal means that there's an infinite amount of time in the past. An infinite amount of time.
Sure.
So you're basically saying that if there's an infinite amount of time and you still believe that and there's a present, then you're saying that I can count from one and an infinite amount of time I'll eventually get into infinity.
No.
You can never reach infinity.
Yeah, good thing you're not starting from infinity.
Exactly, because eternal doesn't mean it starts or it ends.
Yeah, it doesn't have a start. That's the point.
Exactly. So if there is no definitive
it just
start,
always was.
Then there is no definitive now.
Sure there is. Also, to be clear, B theory says that there is no now, or that now is not special. So the B theory of time kind of does away with this whole infinite regress problem. If you can even call it a problem.
What is that?
The B theory of time states that all moments of time are equally real. That the experience of time flowing is an illusion that we experience as objects existing in it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Did the universe create time?
I don't think that that's like a sensible thing. I think that if time exists in any sensible way, it's existed with the universe forever.
Okay, so...
Or rather, it's existed as long as the universe has.
Which is eternally, apparently.
Yeah, that's at least plausible, yeah.
So, if it's eternal, and we know that matter moves and flows through entropy, and everything reaches its lowest energy state, then wouldn't it be logical to assume that because of that, we would right now be nothing? Because we've had an infinite amount of time for matter to...
No, because there are mechanisms to dump entropy.
Well, even if you don't believe in entropy, there is a lot of scientific theories claiming that in trillions and trillions, and however long you want to talk about in years in the future, that everything, all the stars will die out.
Yeah, that's one possible explanation, but there are other possible explanations for what will happen in the far future.
That is the leading scientific explanation, though. Maybe
it is. I don't actually know if that's... I mean, maybe it is, but that doesn't mean
If you
it's
want
true.
evidence, there's very clear evidence to suggest things move away from us.
Yeah, absolutely. The universe is expanding.
Exactly.
I
So
agree.
with that, objects expand, things die, stars die.
Yeah,
And
unless it
because
stops
stars die-
expanding and starts to collapse, or unless it spawns off a baby universe at the moment of heat death and dumps energy into the baby universe, or entropy into the baby universes, and then restarts,
So like the
or
big,
unless it undergoes the conformal a conformal rescaling, and the moment of heat death is the same as the moment of the Big Bang. Like, there's a whole bunch of possible explanations as to what happens in a long time. We don't really know.
Yeah, hold on. Close my door.
I'm sorry. What's up? How old are you?
I'm about 15.
Oh my god. No, you can't be here. I should have known. His voice was young. Why didn't anybody say anything? It's 18 plus, bud. Sorry. I heard it in the voice, but I just didn't think about it at first. You guys are better than this. You guys are supposed to catch me.
Hey.
Royage, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing alright. How old are you?
I'm 27.
Alright. And what god do you believe in?
Any god.
Any god? So do you pray to anything?
Prayer?
Yeah. Do you pray?
What's the meaning of that? What's the meaning of prayer?
You know what the word means. Why are you doing this?
Well, no, I believe in the existence of any god depicted.
Do you believe that Zeus is real?
Yeah, I think real in the sense of like as a literary device.
Okay. Well, then we agree. We agree. Let's bring on another guest. Let's bring on Sky Strikes. Sky Strikes. You know what I'm gonna do? Alright, Sky Strikes isn't connecting. You just heard a bell. You're right, because the bell in the church that I live next to just rang. Absolutely correct. Well, it's 9:45 at night, so I don't think it's prayer time. Rhino, how old are you? If you have any ideas for entropy reset, should you let me know? Maybe. Alright, looks like he's teacupped. Look, y'all, we're out of guests. 9:45 p.m. bell. Yeah, I don't know why it just rang. It just did. We're out of guests. I'm pretty sure that that all of the interesting nutters. You know what? I should hold on. Hold on. I have a plan. I have a plan. No, I'm not going to change topics. Ah, we have a guest. Is it your human brother? It's not my human brother, no. Alright, let's talk to Troy.
Hello.
Troy, how's it going? Was that me that I was hearing in the background?
I'm sorry, I had a podcast playing and it kept going. I'm sorry.
You're good. What god do you believe in?
I'm unsure, but I guess I would have to say it's probably a multifaceted God pulling from all different ones if I had to say I believed, but I had an
Troy,
idea of...
Are you
Yep.
driving?
No, I'm a passenger, actually.
Can you ask the driver to say something?
Well, it's an Uber driver. He's in front. I don't want to bother him. But if we could just go over the three body problem, I feel like the three body problem...
Wait, hold on.
Sorry?
Who the hell goes onto a TikTok live while in an Uber?
Well, I'm just bored waiting to get to my destination. I watch you all the time. I
appreciate that, but like, think of the poor Uber driver.
Yeah, I think he's okay.
Can you say something? Can you say hi?
I don't know. Can you say hi for him? Oh. Okay. So, what I thought was in the three body problem, that perhaps there's an indication of some sort of... I like to call it like I had to give it a name, like an eidolon force or some sort, or where the laws of physics break and true creativity bursts forth somehow, indicating that there must be like the world of forms or something that is indicative of another realm or something where perhaps there is this indication of a deity or something. I might be way off base here, but it was just an idea I've been kind of trying to reel in. Is there... What do you think?
I think that I didn't follow any of that, and I also think that you're making up that you were that was the Uber driver.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
Well, does it matter?
Yeah, it does, because it's TikTok TOS.
Well, I am in an Uber.
Are you the Uber driver?
I don't...
Are you the Uber driver?
But if you... I am not, I promise.
Okay.
You. But
all right.
if you don't want to continue, I totally understand.
Yeah, but I didn't. I also didn't follow any of that.
Okay, so I was just thinking about the three body problem, how it seems that the unpredictable nature of three bodies revolving around each other may create conditions under which the laws of physics are changing, and that's this unpredictability.
But they are completely predictable. Keep that in mind. They're completely well described by the laws of gravitation.
Okay, so I must be completely misunderstanding the three body problem then. If they're...
Probably.
It was my impression that we weren't able to predict their orbits completely.
No, we can use computers to simulate it entirely.
Well then, that's excellent. I thought so this idea of the three body problem being an unsolvable one, that's gone.
It's wrong. It's wrong. It's been wrong for 100 years.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that and know that our reality is not prone to unpredictable and irrational movements of celestial bodies. So, but yeah, I cannot convince you to believe in any God. I don't think I have the knowledge to do so, but I really appreciate you talking to me about that.
Of course. Thanks for being here, bud. Sorry for grilling you on the Uber thing.
Don't be sorry.
I still don't believe you, by the way, but he lied convincingly enough that hopefully TikTok won't get mad. Look, y'all, we're out of guests. I don't know where all the guests went, but we're out of them. So we might just have to end the live early tonight. I don't know what else to do. I'm not going to change topics. We've been doing this for too long. Yeah. Hard to say. No, I know Ian's live. That's where all the guests are. I DM'd Ian and I'm like, look, Ian probably has like 30 guests right now. And I'm like, look, just send a few of them my way. Right? Just send, no, there's no guests on YouTube. Just send a few of them my way because you're not going to get to all of them. but you know, it's fine. Greetings, Eric. Greetings in Poland. It's fine. I'm gonna end the live here. And I'll probably go hang out with Ian in a bit. I have some stuff to take care of first. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for being lovely humans. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for some more debates. And by the way, before I go, in about a month and a half, I will be back in the United States, and me and Ian's time zones will not overlap anymore. So there's nothing really to worry about. You know, I won't be streaming for the first 2 weeks of May anyway, and I probably won't be streaming for the latter half of May because I'll be packing. But yeah, so by the time June starts up, hopefully we will be back to doing more America-friendly live streams, and you should be able to tune in after Ian, presumably. I suspect the lives will probably be in the evening in Mountain Time, whenever that is. Anyway, take care, everybody. I will see you guys next time.